All right, what is up? What is up, everybody? It is time for the show that everyone, wants to see, I guess, on a Friday. And trying to make sure to adjust this, yes, so I can see everything. All right. So, that being said, welcome aboard. It is Ask Reformed Christian Apologist number 98. I am your host, RC Apologist. And it is a good old Friday, and of course, it is the day after Valentine's Day. So, as a result, I am enjoying sweet tarts hearts. No, not that chalky stuff. I'm going full on with this stuff through the power of sweet tarts. Yeah. So, I'll be munching on these occasionally, but I make sure one thing for sure: my mic is going to be muted as I do that. So, that being said and done. Let me just go ahead and I'm still sharing the link out to a few people because they may want the link to come in, or they may want the watching link, however they want to do it. But yeah, so actually, let me see. Oh yeah, we've got yeah, the reason you can't unmute your mics because I didn't broadcast you yet. So now you can because I finally broadcasted you. So welcome back. All right. All right. So to get off an introduction, I see we got 5 people watching. So here's how this works. If y'all are new to this, I say this just in case it does happen. So if you're wondering how to ask questions on the show known as Ask Reformed Christian Apologist, there are about 3 different ways. Number 1, you can submit a question into the live chat, which I see we have people that are doing so. In fact, I already mentioned my sort of guide to help people figure out where that is if they can't figure that out for themselves is the one where it has me saying tacos on it, because why not? Now, now the second way is to DM me on social media for the link. So if you got a Twitter or anything like that, you can feel free to message me and ask for the link to join in and watch, or to come in here and participate, and that way we can have a one-on-one back and forth Q&A thing. So there's that way. And then the third way is Discord questions, which again, Discord's also the way you can ask me for the link to come in. So yeah, we have a section on there on our Discord server, which is entitled, Ask RC Apologist, and then this thing is called Show Questions Only, where we take your questions. And finally, we've actually gotten a good amount of questions that have been put in, especially some from the guy who calls himself the White Engine. Who knows if he'll show up again, because we all know that he has some of the most interesting questions. In fact, not going to lie, the last one he put on here, for a guy who tries to quote unquote defend some of us, he's like, I don't know, this is just the worst argument I've seen, or question I've seen, where he seems to indicate he's arguing for the other team. But that being said,
he basically goes, "That's barbaric." Wah!
Yeah,
I've seen Shane Killian come up with better arguments, and that's saying a lot.
Well, that's the thing, though. He, we had issue with him about, because someone asked if masturbation was a sin, and whenever I said it is, he's like, no, it's not. The Bible doesn't say it is. And so we got into that whole thing. We found out what his problem was on that. So that being said, that's the ways you can ask the questions. So wow, we're getting more people in, 9 watching now. So yeah, those are our 3 ways to ask the Discord, and to ask questions. And if you need to have a run through of them, they're in the description below, or in the description box, which also contains the link to come in for the Discord. So if you need that, go ahead and refer to that. And if you got questions in the live chat, feel free to type those up and get us going with that. Now, before we go to Zach here, we're going to start off with some, and let me just make sure I go to Hangouts in case some people on there aren't trying to message me or anything like that for the link. Let's see. Where was I? All right. So Stepper asks, why are many Calvinists so stubborn to accept the fact that Yahweh had a divine council filled divine. I guess he said, meaning to say, filled with divine beings that were more than just angels.
Oh boy.
Well, as far as the whole thing, I think it was just angels, especially based on some of the work. Especially, I have the book from Heiser in Called Angels, and that's essentially what, like, the Elohim and the divine councils seem to be. It's just that was what they were. So, but yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that's the reason why is because when you introduce this concept, and you got to admit it's a little new, interesting. They're obviously going to have disagreements. They're obviously going to have a problem with it. There was one Reformed Calvinist that was trying to explain this, and he knew what was going on. It was either Andrew Rappaport or it was what's his name? I forget his name, but he's on the Free Thinker podcast, and that was his whole thing. Is that, he would affirm kind of that thing. He's Reformed because he's from the Orthodox Presbyterian church. So it really depends, because some Calvinists just are too deep in tradition, while as others that are trying to look for something that's definitely biblical, especially when looking at the history of the Hebrew people and the Hebraic language, then we'll most certainly get this kind of concept. But I don't think that they were anything more than angels in the divine council. I think they were special angels. They were certainly like higher ranked angels, if you will, that were there. But anyways, thank you for your question. All right, so the White Engine says, in Exodus 20:11, God said, in 6 days Yahweh your God made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that's in them. But he rested on the seventh day. We know there was no actual creation days. God was conforming to the culture, limited understandings and all, but this is giving inaccurate information as if it were fact. In Exodus 34:7, where God says that kids and grandkids are punished. Okay, that's another thing. It's another question. Oh yeah, Rafe was telling me that it's Tyler Vela, who was the Free Thinker podcast thing. All right, so let's see here. So he's saying that there was no actual creation days, and he was just conformed to the culture, limited understandings. But this given that, so he really didn't ask a question or formulate a question. He was just trying to, again, ramble as he usually tends to do. But
just trying to score points.
Well, that's the thing. He even says, I'm not again. He claims to be for Christianity and is a defender of Christianity, even though he's a, quote, secular theist, and that he defends Christians and Christianity. But like, the problem with this is that he's way too skeptical for his own good, that he's just asking ridiculous questions, even though the same he can just go to scholars and all that would disagree with him and point out why he's wrong. So here's the thing: with God given this information, again, he's conforming to the culture and using their understanding because he's trying to relate theology. I've explained this to Engine before. I don't know why this hasn't stuck in his head, that God's more interested in relaying to them the idea that God is, the sovereign Lord, that he is the ruler and he is the creator. That's the most important part, because we're dealing with the story of creation. Therefore, creation is the most important part of the story, not how specifically it was done.
Right, and that's part of the social concepts of the time.
Yeah,
they did not emphasize precision like we do. They cared more about the point of the narrative.
Yeah. And the other reason why he uses the days concept is to point out the whole thing about the Sabbath, because he knows that eventually this is going to be used to relay information about, as God rested on the seventh, so you too rest on the seventh. We know God doesn't get tired. There's no need for him to rest. He uses that to relay them that, okay, just like in this, that y'all and how God rests, then y'all too need to rest. So it's relaying something that's theologically significant and important for the Sabbath, for the Jews under the Mosaic covenant. So again, there's always a significant point that is being brought about in these texts. So anyways, hope that answers your question there, Injun.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
So
it looks like it's looks like it's just my questions from that point on Discord.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to ask those or if you want to ask another one because it's your turn. We're gonna go. By the way, for those that do want to come in again, just message me for the link via Discord, Twitter, however you want to go about it, and I'll get you the link to come in so that way we don't let any trolls get in here. But anyways, it's a first come first served order. So in other words, that means that since our friend Zach has come in here, that means he gets the opportunity to ask the questions first in the lineup. So take it away.
Yeah, I've put in a few on Discord. I'll do it in chronological order. Which academic resources talk about exaggeration of military conquests in the ancient Near East?
And say again.
Okay. Which academic resources talk about exaggeration of military conquests in the ancient Near East?
Okay. So which academic? Okay, so there's plenty of them. You have number one, Kenneth Kitchen's book on the Old Testament, and then if you want to go over, I haven't seen anything about it, but I have heard before that it does partially mention it as the ancient texts. Hold up, let me. I think it's called Ancient Texts for the Study of the Hebrew Bible. That's pretty much one of the good ones there. You'll usually have some commentaries that will kind of pull off that kind of idea of, expounding upon that specific language. So again, it really depends on who the scholar is, but they definitely making a point on dealing with the subject, especially the set of verses. That's what you'll go to. Another one, though, I'll recommend just for namesake, is Lost World of the Israelite Conquests by John Walton. So those are two books that I got given by name, and of course, or three actually. And then, of course, just mention that if you're dealing with commentaries, especially single volume commentaries dealing with a specific verse, that's where you'll most certainly get something out of it.
Yeah, ancient texts for the study of the Hebrew Bible. That sounds oddly familiar. I think I may have checked it out at the college library once.
Wouldn't surprise me. It looks like something for a college setting for sure.
Yeah.
Because it does go over like the various different books or texts that they had back then during that ancient Near Eastern period.
Yeah, Lost World of the Israelites.
Israelite conquests.
Israelite conquest. Okay. Ready. Turn it over to Fanboy.
All right, then. Thank you for your question there. All right. So, Religious Fanboy, your turn. How are you doing? And what is your question? Fanboy, are you there?
You there?
Hello.
Hello.
Were you trying to do Jim Carrey? Oh, there he is.
Sorry.
I was trying to imitate Tigger, the old Tigger.
There you go.
Guys?
I'm doing pretty good. Just chilling, chilling. So, how you doing, and what's your question?
I'm doing a lot better than I was last week.
That's
I was kind of sick last week. I kind of was getting sick earlier, but I feel a lot better now. I my first question is what advice you guys have when doing Bible studies? Um that on passages of scripture that involve like genealogies or
Genealogies. Ah,
or like
I have no
lists
clue.
of people's names involved in certain things, like what
all right.
would
So repeat that again.
when discussing passages of scripture that are that consist of either genealogies or lists of people's names in scripture, how is best way to discuss that in a Bible study? Or if
Hmm.
you guys have advice for stuff
Well,
like
well, it would really depend on the topic. I mean, because the issue about like, for example, genealogies would definitely be important when discussing the birth of Christ and how that is significant. Um, then probably the relevance of why Jude quotes from the Book of Enoch and showing that Enoch is mentioned in the Bible in Genesis among the lineage there. So you have, you know, reasons that would be significant. But I mean, as far as the passages about lineage, they're really just there as a historical thing, but they may not be significant concerning the majority of trying to exegete a text of the Bible for a Bible study.
thanks. I was wondering about how to discuss stuff like that. Just like wondering if I'd mainly be discussing it as like historical accounts. Like how
Right.
and yeah. Thanks very much, you guys.
No problem, man. Thank you for your question.
Oh,
And
hey,
look who
Peter.
just joined in just in time to get his turn to ask a question. It is the one and only is an orange dog who has some yellow as well as some white in the shape of a candy corn. And there's also a dog. It is candy corn doggo Ave.
Arf, arf.
There you
Hello.
go. Hello. How was your Valentine's Day, by the way?
Oh, it was utterly lonely.
Same. That's what happens when you're a single asexual type of person like me that just has no interest in people or anything for that matter. I want to that alarm went off. Hope this doesn't get copyright infringed. I almost forgot the one time in a long while that I forget to turn off my alarm before doing one of these. Well, at least I know.
I think
All
you'll
right,
be fine.
but yeah, but
I did get some nice fan art though from some people.
I noticed. I saw one with you and with Sparky Fulf, which by the way, Sparky is welcome back anytime. So if he wants the link or if you want to offer him an invitation, he's more than welcome to come on in.
Yeah, all right. But yeah, so I got some art of that, which was really nice. But pretty much Valentine's Day, no, I just stayed home and hung out, watched some TV and YouTube, and did the usual.
Sounds good to me. It's pretty much what I did. But anyways, enough small talk. Let's get to the real reason why you're here. You want an answer from me to one of your questions. Well, I'll tell you. I think I may have an answer. It may not be satisfactory, but it may be an answer. So, what is your question?
All right. This is actually something I've been thinking about recently, considering some recent laws, regarding abortion and things like that. I was kind
Yep.
of wondering what your opinion was on the separation of church and state, and if you think it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Sorry, I just took my medicine there.
Like,
I think like concerning the separation of church and state, that's a good thing. There is really not so much of a call for this kind of stuff. To me, that would be theonomy, and of course, some of the reformed on my side will disagree with me. But as far as the whole thing, like the reason why it's good is because therefore there's sort of an equality kind of thing that can be made. That doesn't meaning that there's no laws that are made due to in other words, not just to establish a religion, but even to persecute one's own religious beliefs. So I think it's sort of a neutral uh, thing when it comes to dealing with those matters. And there's actually, of course, I disagree with him on other things though. Nowadays, that is a guy who goes by the name of Russell Moore, who is a Southern Baptist guy, and he's pretty much where I get kind of get influenced by him. But he was at the SBC, the Southern Baptist convention or conference in 2016, or it was SBC 16. And he was going to make he answered a question from someone that does kind of pertain to the topic, and I want everyone to listen to this because this is actually a very important statement from him that does kind of reflect in general the this particular kind of question that we're dealing with. So here it is, in 3, 2.
Your question. Yes, my name is John Wofford. I pastor Armorel Baptist Church in Armorel, Arkansas, and I have a question for Dr. Moore. I would like to know how in the world someone within the Southern Baptist Convention can support the defending of rights for Muslims to construct mosques in the United States when these people threaten our very way of existence as Christians and Americans. They are murdering Christians, beheading Christians, imprisoning Christians all over the world. Do you actually believe that if Jesus Christ were here today, that he would support this and that he would stand up and say, well, let us protect the rights of those Baal worshipers to erect temples to Baal? Do you believe that, Dr. Moore?
You know, sometimes we have to deal with questions that are really complicated, and we have to spend a lot of time thinking them through and not sure exactly what the final result was going to be. Sometimes we have really hard decisions to make. This isn't one of those things. What it means to be a Baptist is to support soul freedom for everybody. And brothers and sisters, when you have a government that says we can decide whether or not a house of worship can be constructed based upon the theological beliefs of that house of worship, then there are going to be Southern Baptist churches in San Francisco and New York and throughout this country who are not going to be able to build. And the bigger issue, though, is not one of self-interest. The bigger issue is the fact that we have been called to the gospel of Jesus Christ. A government that has the power to outlaw people from assembling together and saying what they believe, that does not turn people into Christians. That turns people into pretend Christians, and it sends them straight to hell. The answer to Islam is not government power. The answer is the gospel of Jesus Christ and the new birth that comes from that.
Amen.
That's a pretty good answer, if there ever was any. Wow.
And so,
you wonder why I'm an anarchist?
well, of course, I disagree with anarchism, but that's a different thing. But here's the thing: when it comes to things like abortion, because then that's a different topic involved in that. Now, I definitely am for the idea that we need to make a legislation that is, outlawing it, and that's not based on any religious grounds. There are even atheists and secularists that point that out. So, when it comes to the topic of church and state, I'm for the separation of church and state because I realize that the church does not need to have power over government and does not need to be involved in governmental decisions. It needs to only be involved in its own government, in its own church government over the body of Christ, not have some sort of reigning theonomy or theocracy over people. I think that would be problematic, and we've seen historically where that's been problematic in church history for its time. So I think that's something we need to consider.
I guess what I was kind of getting at was, wouldn't it be better if we had Christian morals that helped govern things like laws and whatnot? Which I think for the most part, our politicians are somewhat moral, at least, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's stuff like that. But then there are some people who are not. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I think because there are some things in that in our government and in our laws already that shows that they have these things, what we would call Christian morals, and there's an answer for that. It's in Romans chapter 2, verse 14 and 15. It says that all men have the law in their hearts. So we all know what's right and wrong. And when we have things like when saying that or outlawing murder, for example, well, we have the law in our hearts. So that shows that we just simply are proving the Bible to be true because we know right and wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so you'll have some of that, but of course you have some people that just are wicked and want to deny and reject the laws that they obviously know is, right and wrong. So
not only that, but they even come to that by way of deontological ethics, of philosophy. I mean, yeah.
Yep. By the way, for those that I don't know if y'all hear any sounds, but I'm slowly to make sure that, of course, there leaves no damage. I just bought a new book today, and it was this one was good. I've been wanting this book for a year, I'd say, and it's or a year or two, I forget. But it's been a while, and they finally had it on the bookstore that I go to, Lifeway, for 90% off. So I literally just got this for $1.49. Is called Know the Creeds and Councils by Justin S. Holcomb, who is a Episcopal priest and a professor of theology and Christian thought at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary and Reformed Theological Seminary. And this book, it's a small handheld type of book. It's a pocket type of book almost. And all it is a brief, concise introduction to a good bit of the early church councils of history, starting from the Apostles' Creed, and let's see what and it even goes to like modern confessions. So it goes from all the councils and confessions and points out some historical thing, not just pointing out Catholic ones, but even the Protestant ones, and shows all the history of those things. So that being said,
What's the title of that?
Huh? It's called Know
the
Creeds and Councils.
Okay.
All right.
And I think I just expanded my question there with that.
There you go. All right. So, we got to get to the people in the live chat, but thank you for the question, by the way, Ave.
All right.
All right. So let's see. And hey, if y'all want to come in, again, Twitter, Discord, y'all want in, y'all just message me and we'll get you set right on in. All right. And we're still, by the way, for our Discord, we're going to have to wait and halt on White Engine's questions because he's saying that that's basically all he wants to ask. And so it would defeat the purpose of him coming in if he had those whole things. So that being said, and I'm actually going to extend a greeting to this guy. I'll be debating him Thursday. Master Apologist, otherwise now known on Twitter as Apologist Supreme God. We'll be debating our Roman Catholics, our brothers and sisters in Christ. I, of course, am going to take the position that those who, of course, are affirming the dogmas of Rome aren't, and that they are pretty much, because, the dogmas of Rome being the papal infallibility, the doctrines about Mary that do seem to escalate her to the status of a goddess. Those things I would consider to be problematic. And there's only one time that this debate occurred, and that was between James White and I forget what his name is, Douglas Wilson. So hopefully that'll be an interesting debate. What the? Okay, I don't know how this is going to turn out. We got a guy in the YouTube chat saying, "I'm atheist Christian." So
What?
Yeah.
This kind of thing. How? I mean,
I have to ask how secular theism is a thing, but that being said, all right, and something just flew in my eye. All right, there we go. All right, so we're gonna check some of y'all out in the YouTube live chat and see what we got. Mickey Mick says, if government employees are Christian and bound by Christian doctrine, doesn't that make the state Christian anyway? If the government employees are Christian and are bound by Christian doctrine, doesn't that make the state Christian? I wouldn't think so. I mean, I don't think anywhere in that does it mean that happens. He follows and say you are a Christian government employee who has the final say on whether porn should be outlawed. Aren't you obliged to go with the outlaw decision based on your Christian doctrine? I think it's the issue of deciding on living your life in accordance to what the Bible says versus how the government would view it if it's going against your beliefs. Because the Bible does say, to submit yourselves to the governing authorities. And so much, though, as they aren't going against that what God has established to be right, to be morally right, or to be part of your Christian walk. So when
real quick, break the chains. I just noticed the icon. Crap.
What is it?
I think he has the ANCOM flag behind him. So
so
no wonder Mick said liberation theology. That goes ANCOMs, my sworn enemies.
Yeah, me and Dave have had our experience with the anarchy commies.
Yeah, a little bit. Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
How can you have an anarchy yet at the same time initiate force in order to obtain another person's resources? That's
just being a thief, aren't really? Like you're just breaking into things and just stealing whatever you want.
Yeah, well, the thing is, ANCOMs. The thing is, ANCOMs think that the majority should be able to take what a minority people have just because that minority has more. So, yeah, by doing that, they effectively rendered themselves a state by default, which goes contrary to what anarchy is.
Well, this is why I'm not an anarchist. I just don't understand or care much for politicians. So this is why they call me I guess a lactist or something. It almost sounds like I'm saying lactose intolerant, but whatever. That being said,
you're lack politicianal intolerant.
Yeah, let's go with that one. That sounds a little more off the tongue right there, doesn't it?
Why not? I don't know.
All right, so that
free territory. Free territory said ANCOMs are silly. Tank Stalinism is where it's at, homies. Okay, what
in the world is this? Free.
What the heck are you talking about?
More better yet, how come we have like two of these? I have a feeling we're going to be involved with a lot of interesting individuals for the chat. So, yeah. Alrighty then. That being said, let's go ahead and check on any other questions. Yeah, break the chains and free territory. If y'all have questions, feel free to send them. Let's see. What else have y'all guys been talking about above? Shimerson White Engine's a good boy. I keep thinking of that game Red Dead Redemption 2 with Arthur's like, good boy, you're a good boy. Or what else is it? Sure, I guess you're right. And we need the money. Ave, where's our money?
I am a good boy. I don't know.
Yeah, you're a good boy. Now where's our money?
I ate it.
Dang it, Ave.
Ah!
What would be even better though is like, because I can't do it as two voices, Dutch Vanderland and John Marston, because those are just some memorable voices right there. All right. That being said, let's continue onward. By the way, if y'all are in the YouTube live chat, if y'all have questions, again, feel free to send them. Stop being shy about everything. Just again, we welcome you and endorse your curiosity and your questions. In fact, just to make sure that this gets out to even more people, we're going to, because I forgot to say live now on Twitter, so we'll do that. Maybe that'll get some people watching and decide a sentence of questions. I don't know why I just talked like that. I'm going to just shut up now and go straight to Zach with our next question. Zach, how are you doing? And what's your question?
Doing all right. Apart from that whole debacle with the ANCOM. Anyway, my question. I'll read off of the Discord. Another Discord one. How do you respond to the Euthyphro dilemma?
The heck, huh?
The Euthyphro dilemma.
Explain what that is for me, because I've lost
All right.
philosophical terms.
Okay. Basically, it asks, is something good because God commands it, or is what commands it, or does God command it because it's good? Yeah, that's what. Yeah, esoteric the free sometimes brings up that sort of thing when he starts, as well as some other people. So.
Well, I think that the issue with this is that because there are some things, as Heiser pointed out, because I mentioned this in my Numbers 31 video, is that not everything that is commanded is mutually in and of itself good. For example, like the conquests, obviously there could have been a better way at approaching something, but he's again using their culture to carry out something that theologically has a significant message and importance. And so when you have, him commanding things, in a way, some of the stuff is good, but at the same time, other things aren't as good. And so rather or not he determines this, I don't think we really can figure out an answer for that by going through those two statements, because we don't know the mind of God. It could be because whatever he says is good because of that reason alone, or it's because that thing does have some good qualities of itself. So again, it's just based on how we understand creation and God's knowledge, and we won't know that until we ask him in heaven. All right, so that being said, okay, getting another heart out so that way I can just getting another one of these sweet tarts hearts so I can keep myself awake a bit. Also, I may just send the rest of this over to Ave. Anyways, that being said, What?
You're gonna send what to me?
Probably send the rest of these sweet tarts hearts, because it even has the thing that says to and from, and we'll just see how that turns out. Ow! Man, thought I busted a tooth there with just a sweet tart heart. That heart ain't sweet. Man.
Maybe I shouldn't be having those.
As long as you don't do stupid things like I just did, because I'm like trying to toss it in my mouth like popcorn.
Oh yeah.
And I threw a little too hard there. Oh wait. Well, I already crushed it up. My mouth is salivating like crazy. So, oh my goodness. Fanboy, what's your question? So I can mute myself.
Oh, there's so much pressure right now. You're asking me to ask you a question, so you can mute yourself. Well, right now, I noticed in my Life Application Study Bible, the way it's divided up
Uh-huh.
in like the side sections.
Yeah.
There are one of the sections that from the Bible that I had been referring to for the Bible study. I'm using looking at my life application one right now. This one has like one of the sections divided up. So I was just wondering if that's like a common occurrence, like how they divide up sections for like pertaining to certain topics, like if that varies between translations.
Well, I mean, I think that would be the issue. Does like you're talking about like a paper or something?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not so it's not the Bible that you're saying it's on, right?
Oh, like it's a page in my study Bible,
Yeah.
but also I've been referring to like my waterproof and my pocket Bible.
So the part, are you like? So I'm trying to understand what your question.
Like you know how there are sometimes in scripture where there's full chapter divisions, but also there's the ones where there's like these like title like referencing what the section of scripture, like the topic of the section of scripture is.
Topic of section of scripture. Like, are you talking about when it talks about wisdom, literature, or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's usually in your study Bibles at times, because my NIV study Bible has that.
Okay.
So it just depends on who the publisher is or the study Bible.
Well, thanks.
No problem, man. All right. That being said, let's move on to our next questionnaire, and that would be Ave.
Okay. So RC, you're a very well-versed debater, and this is kind of like a personal question, but I was wondering, out of all the people you've ever had conversations with, who's your what's your favorite debate, and like who is it with, and what was it about?
Well, my favorite debate.
Yeah, like do you have a favorite one?
Oh, that's a good question, actually.
Like a really like really engaging, really interesting topics you guys were talking about, and you just really liked it.
Oh, let's see here. Try to get to my actual channel so that way I can take a look at the playlist, because it's been a while since I've had some of the debates, because they go back through about 2 or 3 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so let's see here. All right, I guess at this point 3 or 4 years. Out of all of the debates I've done, I would have to say that the most favorite of mine would have to be, well, there's actually 2 of them because they're on equal parting. Would be the debates between me and Catholic Fusionist. Because me and Max, who is the Catholic Fusionist, have we're both well respectful. We have both been experienced in debates, and because of that, we've managed to go over each other's points perfectly well. Being respectful and making strong points in cases for each of our own sides. And that's the thing I always like about Max, is that he's someone that he doesn't let up. He will give it all he's got, and he's very smart and wise. So he's got a lot of knowledge behind him. And so when it comes to that, I did suggest to him at one point that we try to do a series of Catholic and Protestant debates. And the best one that I could think of that would be in a similar format would be James White and Mitch Pacwa, a Protestant and a Catholic. Though I don't think that he's
Ooh.
and I think that Max would actually kind of feel insulted almost a bit being compared to someone who's of the Jesuit order, because Mitch Pacwa is of the Jesuit order and has a lot of high rankings in the Catholic study. But he's a very well researched individual. But they've been in like 4 debates at least with each other, Mitch Pacwa and James White. And so, I think that whole thing is kind of how it's like with us. We're, respectful with each other, and we get straight to the point. We don't like dilly-dally around or try to, blah, 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 blah.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember I saw the debate with I've seen a lot of your videos before, but especially the one with I think his name is Amun Ra. He got so mad
Aaron
at
Ra,
the end.
yeah.
Yeah, Aaron Ra. He got like so mad at the end. He was basically like yelling like a child. It was kind of embarrassing.
Pretty much.
What was he even mad at?
He's like, "Oh, God's not real!" He just like freaked out at the end. Yeah, especially after going over everything that they discussed. It was about the debate was pretty much, is the Bible still relevant?
Yeah.
But he just got so angry at the end, where like all of his points are kind of just like, well, he never really cared to begin with. That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
Oh, Ron.
Yeah.
By the way, we keep getting this guy named Fried Nexus who's asking like a bunch of questions in the chat.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, those would be my favorite debates. Thanks for the question, by the way, Ave.
Awesome.
Don't want to make you feel like you get ignored at times. But let's see. Yeah, well, Zachary already answered that, and he said, me and Ave are furries, because the guy's asking, are any of you furries? And we are.
Yeah, well, duh. I mean, you can look at my icon. That's literally me in my fursuit.
Okay, so a guy, which I'm skeptical of the guy, because he's just like, going all at it, and plus I, have questions if the guy is even Muslim based on the profile picture. Because because all he's saying is, how do I join discussion? I am Muslim and I enjoy Islam. No hate to any other Muslims or any other religions. LOL.
Yeah, Fire Nexus asks, what do you think of Islam, though?
Okay, who?
Okay,
Yeah, so my thoughts on Islam is that it's a false religion. I think that I'm not the one that's going to go out and say that, like how Sam Shimon and Robert Spencer say that's all it is like it's like the only consistent kind of thing you have is that it's violence and warfare and jihad. My whole point has been that it's inconsistent, and that with regard to Islam, you can find text that does support and defend the idea of a peaceful, let's live together, to your religion be your religion, peacefully Islam. But at the same time, you have other texts that can also support what ISIS and Boko Haram is doing right now, because they even go to Sahih, authentic texts of Hadith. They go to the Quran, and they go to the scholars of people like Al-Tabari, Ibn Kathir, Al-Jalalain, Al-Qurtubi, and all these other scholars, and point out things that can make a case for them. And I also think that Islam is a false religion due to the fact that if the Quran is supposedly written by Allah on eternal tablets in heaven, and that those eternal tablets' content is then relayed to Muhammad, then the idea of that Allah thinks that Jesus was never crucified, even though Jesus' crucifixion is a historical fact that is undeniable, just shows how unknowing that Allah, this Islamic God concept, truly is. It really doesn't have any basis in understanding facts and history, because if he was all-knowing, he would know and state in the Quran Jesus was crucified. But unfortunately, the Quran clearly denies the crucifixion of Jesus. So that would be the problem with Islam, is that it is a religion that promotes falsehoods and is inconsistent with itself. There is no consistency in Islam, and therefore both ISIS and the moderate Muslims in America can both equally be considered following their religion. And that's unfortunately what the problem is in Islam.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I mean, yeah, Christian Guardian said, reminds me of Mormonism. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I would say, like,
If you-
when you're talking about Islam, all you really have to do is just look at the facts. I mean,
Yeah.
it was founded by a person who married a 6-year-old child. But not just that. Even, like, there's a fundamental aspect of Islam called taqiyya, which basically allows its adherents to be deceptive and lie to people
Yeah.
about themselves. And that's... lying is not good. Like,
Yeah.
Objectively, it's not. Like, come on. So it's
The-
automatically you know, just,
well,
deceptive.
here's the thing as well. The Kia is actually only in a minority of Islam in terms of an official practice that is being
Shia.
welcomed. Yeah, Shia. But as David Wood points out, is the concept of taqiyya though really, as we can find in the Quran? Yes, actually it is. And of course we could go all till there's verses about it, but there is actually the Islam Q&A thing, and as well as others that point out that there's actually while Sunni Muslims don't have taqiyya, there's actually only 3 things that they go to that allow for the constitution of lying. So in fact, let me see here.
The problem is, it's still a major aspect of the religion, and Shia might be a minority, but it's still a pretty large number of people.
Yeah, let me see here. There's actually, because he actually there's this guy. He's popular on YouTube or on Twitter, because you can actually message him on Twitter. Like, you have questions about Islam, and I've asked him questions before to like find out if certain hadiths or tafsirs or commentaries are authentic. Hold up real quick, Zach. What you, because you say you were interrupted and you want to resume some? Sure, finish something up as I try to find the clip.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I was saying, I mean, it's unfalsifiable Islam. I mean, they're saying, plus the whole, oh, somebody else was in Jesus' place in that crucifixion. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they would have known that it was a decoy. He would have. It's just.
Yeah. All right. So this clip here is going to be from a Q&A thing from Hakeem on lying in Islam. He gets asked that. We're only going to play a long enough so that he points out the 3 perspectives. We're not going to deal too much with what he has to comment on. We just want to get where he comes at, and there are sources you can look these up, and they'll tell you where they're going to get these from the Hadith, so we're gonna just pull this up and play it so that way y'all can hear from yourselves, not just me, but from even this Muslim sheikh. All right, so Sheikh Asim al-Hakim, and here we go.
Lies, to lie, not to say the truth. No, you cannot lie at all as a Muslim. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, Lying is not permissible except in three situations. One, in war, when we're fighting with the enemy and the armies are here and their armies are coming, and one says, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to fight. This is not logical. You say, I'm going for a picnic. I'm going south, when actually I'm going north. Yes, this is not a lie. This is war strategy. So this is permissible in Islam. Two, when you reconcile between two fighting factions, Muslims. This brother, Abdullah, is not speaking to Muhammad. They're fighting with each other for so many years. I go to Abdullah and say, Abdullah, why don't you speak to Muhammad? He says, Ya akhi, this guy is horrible, he's stingy. I said, yes, but I was with him yesterday. And I spoke to him and he said, MashaAllah, Abdullah is the best man. He's generous, he is kind. But shaitan came between us and I cannot give salam to him. But oh, Wallahi, I love him. And Abdullah says, he said that? I said, yes, Wallahi, he said that. I soften his heart. Then I go to Muhammad and I say the same thing. And he says, Abdullah said that? Yes, he said that and he loves you for the sake of Allah. And I get them to meet together and alhamdulillah, they become friends again. This is not a lie, the Prophet says. This is permissible in Islam. The third lie is for the sisters. And that is, and for the brothers as well. It is permissible for a husband to lie to his wife and for a wife to lie to her husband. And everything, no. The husband leaves at 7 o'clock p.m. Where are you going? I have a meeting. I'm going to the clinic. I have an emergency. He's lying. No, this is haram. Totally prohibited. What is meant in the hadith is you are allowed to lie in order to make your spouse happier. So
I'm not going to spare on that, but
Wow.
the example he gives is the, and I kid you not, the one where the woman asks, "Does this dress make me look fat?"
That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I can't believe that.
So that's not Taqiya. Those are the other, but those are in Sunni Islam. The other three ways that you can ask that how you can lie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, holy cow.
Okay. What? And this is a real religion? Okay.
Yeah, that's part of the Sunni thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
By the way, I saw we had master apologist actually just come in here for a bit. I'm asking him to come back if he can. He thought we were interviewing a Muslim. That was a video. All right, so let's see here. Let me make sure I get everything figured out. Okay. All right, there he is. By the way, we weren't interviewing a Muslim. We were watching a video that showed three perspectives from a Muslim scholar where lying is permissible in Islam, because a guy that claims to be a Muslim, though I'm having doubts, was asking what our thoughts were, and that was, of course, given an exhaustive thing on that. All right. Okay, the guy's, he says it's 14, so I won't just give him too much. I'll give him some slack on that, but I would recommend he investigate more on some of the stuff we said, because it's important to understand this stuff about Islam. Anyways, welcome, though, Master Apologist. What's in the background, by the way? I'm hearing sound like an ESPN sports.
Sorry about that.
It's cool, man.
Okay, I got into another room.
Oh. Welcome aboard.
And by the way, it's not Master Apologist. I'm done away with that name.
All right. So Apologist Supreme.
It's actually Apologist Supreme God.
Which I, of course, have a lot of problems with that particular name, but okay. since we did technically, we only just briefly went over someone in the live chat. We'll allow you to have a chance to have your turn. If you have unless you do have a question, otherwise we can start over with Zachary on the lineup and then get to you. But do you happen to have a question you have at the moment, or?
No, I don't. I was just coming in. I just hope we can all be respectful, and I
Yep.
really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man. All right, so then we'll start off the lineup again. It's a first come first served basis on the order of the lineup. So, and we're still waiting on a White Engine to get in here because he said that he would, and he wanted us to reserve his questions on the Discord for later. So let's go ahead and just jump right back over to you, Zachary. What is your next question?
My next one is.
Hold up a second. When did your voice get deep? I just now noticed this.
It's always been deep, son.
Hey, okay, hold up. Hey, has it always been that deep?
I thought that was a different person.
Yeah.
Okay.
I sometimes let my voice be deep, and sometimes it's like this. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting talent. Anyways, proceed.
Well, I wouldn't really call it a talent. It's just natural. Just which arguments for the existence of God do you think are the strongest?
Okay, let me see. Okay, so the arguments for the existence of God, do I think the strongest? Personally, I don't deal with the existence of God arguments because I believe everyone knows God exists and therefore is irrelevant or not worth trying to debate an issue that they know of God's existence. But if I were to pick one, I would have to say out of all of them would be the moral argument for God's existence, because based off of Romans chapter 1 and 2, we come to that argument, that formulation. By the way, Josh, we're getting like a lot of sound back. If we could you mute until ready to say something, because we're getting a lot of stuff that's throwing me off.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. All right. So yeah, I would say the moral argument for the existence of God is probably not only, in my opinion, the better one, but that you can make a lot of arguments for it biblically to especially make the focus upon the biblical God, due to especially a lot of that focus coming into Romans chapter 1 and Romans chapter 2. So that would be what I would go with.
Yeah, I would probably have gone with mind-body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. I was watching a debate on Modern Day Debate. I was just coming in here to say I'm looking forward to our debate, and I respect you and your views, even though sometimes I come across as a little playful, a little pompous, but I really do, and I think I've expressed this during other debates with other people, other atheists and stuff. I do think there's a lot that binds us together. So, yeah.
Well, appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Well, have a good day, sir.
Yeah, you too. All right. So let's go ahead and get to Religious Fanboy then.
I was wondering, do you look up any like Christian anime reviews? Just because I look those up sometimes, and I was wondering if there were any specific people you recommend.
Any what?
Like Christian anime reviewers.
What do you mean, Christian anime reviewers?
Like Christians that review anime online, like either in article form or video form. Like, just wondering if you.
The only person I can think of that would be close to that is let me see. That's his name. MLP Shady Oak Ministries. He is a brony and a pastor least I think he's a pastor. And every time, like he's done, I think he just actually finished up his Through the Bible series. Look like he just went over the entire Bible and going over like commentary and exposition on each of the things of it that are about hours long. And he also does sometimes reviews, but for the most part does Bible study based off of geeky things. Like he's done 15 Marvel Bible studies, the recent one being on Captain America 2. He's also done Into the Spider-Verse. Let's see. Then he's done some anime ones. Like he's covered Ruby, though he's said he's no longer going to be dealing with that. He believes that there's some problems with the plan of the direction that Ruby has gone into. He's done Disney. He's like Tarzan and Hercules.
Wait, who?
Huh?
Who?
Who? What?
The person you're talking about. Who is he? I didn't get the name.
MLP Shady Oak Ministries. And let's see here. He's also done a apologetics, a reason for hope question and answer thing. But like he's done anime before, I think, because I remember he's done Full Metal Alchemist. He's done what was that one? The guy finds out he's half demon and has a sword. What was that? Blue Exorcist, called the Otaku Bible Study, which he's done at least 20 of those, different series. So, like Attack on Titan being another one. So, but that would be the closest I can get to it.
Can I just say I find it very odd that a person like that even exists?
Well, it's certainly interesting, but again, I think that's where it's kind of nice, is that you have such a diverse group of people.
Yeah, because I've never even heard of that before. It's really mind blowing.
Yeah,
I kind of do some stuff kind of like that, but I try to figure out like if there are other Christian anime reviewers and see what they're talking about, just to get their input on things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just it depends. Like technically, there was actually also something a while back that was considered a Christian anime. Of course, besides the whole the Jesus Christ anime of His Last Day, there was something, I believe it was called. It's called and this is what's so strange about it. It's called Superbook. And of course I can't show a clip due to risking of copyrights. But we know Superbook today as this CGI kind of thing. But it seems and it almost looks like it. I mean, again, I don't know if it is or not. I've heard from people that it actually is anime, because the original thing is because the thing was called Anime Oyaku Gekkeijo, which known as Animated Parent and Child Theater. And even the Wikipedia says it's an anime television series from the early 1980s that was originally produced by Tatsunoko Productions in Japan, in conjunction with the Christian Broadcasting Network in the United States. So they worked with the CBN network. And they created a 52-episode run. And then, of course, it would return for 26 episodes in 1983 with Superbook 2. But I'm going to see if I can at least show a picture of, the Superbook series, at least in terms of what we're dealing with. So, come on, that ain't even a good size of a picture. Okay, we'll just go with what we can. Now let's see here, and this one looks like this one's in the Egypt area. So Like that counts as something, right? All right, so there's that, and then we'll take this one. So I'm just going to try to show both of them as much as I can. All right, and this one up close. Okay, so first the DVD cover. This is Superbook. You can definitely tell it has a bit of an anime-ish 1980s kind of vibe to it, and it's of course a family-friendly one. So it's intended to be something for kids to watch with their parents. And the plot is, of course, that these two kids end up discovering some robot, essentially, and they ask questions about the Bible, and as a result, they end up going. This robot can time travel them to the time of the biblical period. So they go and explore, as we'll see, moments in Bible history. Like in this, I'm going to assume they're at the point where it's Moses, Egypt and Pharaoh. As you can see, that there's the pyramids behind them. So they're watching from an outsider perspective all these things happen. So they don't get to interact in the story as much, but they watch everything unfold as the Bible explains it, and they learn something from it as a result. So just thought that would be interesting to point out that there is actually a Christian anime that was made during the 1980s.
Oh,
Indeed.
And just to kind of tack on something to that, have you guys ever heard of that anime where Jesus and Buddha are like roommates?
Yeah, I already told. Yeah, because White Engine keeps asking me about it, and he recommends that I need to watch it. I'm like, I ain't putting that blasphemous garbage on.
It's utter ridiculous. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because I even I told him why, because at one point it kind of depicts Jesus as a sinner, as someone who may have looked at pornography at some point. Yeah, and then just kind of like it does kind of just put, and even just puts the idea that Jesus was nothing more than just a man and not a god. And so he just it's just a different it's just an alternative take on God, or it's just a perspective on him that's different than the Bible one. I'm like, and it's one that I'm not going to entertain or even view as being true, or something as I want to even just enjoy, because it's upsetting what the fact is and why it was so significant of who Jesus was and why he did what he did. Where this anime just plays it all off for humor and just uses his name for money.
Yeah.
I mean, not only that, but who in their right minds would take it seriously?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, it's meant to be, comical.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's where, of course, that's the problem. They trying to make comedy off of the Messiah, off of the Savior.
Yeah, good luck with that. It's just bleh.
Yeah.
How are you going to make a joke off of something that the jokes just fall flat?
I mean, Jesus and Buddha being roommates, like, what the heck?
Yeah, that's not
what?
That's not even fun. That's not even funny. I mean, where's the joke exactly?
It's just
it's just the idea of what they try to do, because and especially a lot of the emphasis is put on Buddha instead of Jesus.
It's at least the anime it's like no different than Mickey Mouse meets SpongeBob.
Yeah.
Oh wow, two different characters are meeting each other in person, but they totally disregard everything else.
Yeah. And so when it comes to that anime, yeah, that'd be problematic. And what's interesting is a lot of people don't even know that, at least it's some people anyways, because even White Engine keeps finding this hard to believe, that Buddhism being atheistic, and that the Buddha himself taught an atheistic doctrine. In fact, he even said that religion itself was, because the whole thing is trying to extinguish suffering and to eliminate suffering. And so when it comes to suffering, they believe religion plays a role in that, and therefore you need to, if you are religious, you need to relinquish and destroy any religious feelings you have, and no longer have a religion, because a concept of God is just going to disappoint you and make you suffer in the end. So the best way to end that, have no belief in a God at all.
Yeah, so basically it's teaching reject God's love and you'll be feeling better.
Right.
That makes no sense.
Yep. That's unfortunately, though, what happens in Buddhism, though, concerning some of its, because I even tried looking into the scholars and the monks of Buddhism, and they themselves affirmed that, yeah, Buddhism, by its historical origins, it has always been Buddhist in origin. So,
Yeah. How does believing in a deity cause suffering exactly? I don't get it.
yeah, exactly. But anyways, I think we have the question, fanboy, and onward to Ave with our next one.
All right. Well, it's very clear that the Bible is pretty much a historic book. You know, it talks about events in history, but there's also a lot of miracles also described. But then there's also other stories, kind of like, I would say, metaphorical and things like that. For instance, the Tower of Babel. Do you think that that's a real thing that happened? The Tower of Babel. I mean, like compared to other things like Sodom and Gomorrah or Noah's flood or whatnot. But the Tower of Babel, I think, is more of a metaphorical story.
Well, I think it is a real story, and in fact, there's actually but there's a lot different perspectives than how we usually perceive it. Like, a lot of people keep saying that, like, people are going up, or that they're trying to make this tower to go up to God, when that's actually a complete falsehood of what these things actually are supposed to be. And in reality, what these towers that they were building are supposed to relay is actually them trying to get God to come to them. They thought that they were, the hot stuff, that they were like, even though they were humans, that there was really no difference between them and God. And therefore, like, God, get down here. We're basically building this ladder or these stairs for you to get down here. Come on down and be where you need to be with us. And so they think that, they're saying that God isn't, someone that's like better than them and all this glory that resides in heaven, that he's just like them and needs to come down to them. And so you kind of like, oh, you really want to insult me like this, huh, you fellas? And so as that's done, he then decides to, cast a judgment on them for their pride and all that, and scatter them about.
And this would be the origin of different languages.
Correct, and he uses that to express that, and plus that would also be how the ancient people, would have understood that. They wouldn't have gotten, how we today understand ancient language, how languages evolved and how they formed and how cultures worked in other areas. They only understood it from their perspective, and this was, of course, then relayed through that one. And I'm trying to see if there's actually something that's so I'm looking at the Genesis book from, what's his name? Well, it looks like it doesn't cover it, but I do know John Walton actually has covered this in one of his books concerning the Tower of Babel, if not at least a lecture.
It's just like the problem I have with this is, like, there were only so many people that could possibly be working on these towers, and there were thousands of others who lived elsewhere. So how would that affect them?
Probably would not.
Right, and I think that's the thing, is like it's focusing on, because like I said, the main, like, because here's the thing as well to consider, like when it comes to the idea of saying that the whole world was flooded, it was only a local region that was flooded, but to those Israelites, that was the whole world. That was all they knew. That was all they knew existed. They weren't aware of any other regions or areas where other people were existing. So he's using their knowledge that they have, where they think, oh, they're the only people on the face of the planet, and that's it. So
yeah, not only that. Yeah.
So I guess.
Tower of Babel was Ziggurat, most likely.
Yeah, Ziggurat.
So this is probably one of those examples where it was a bit exaggerated, or at least those who wrote the story at the time didn't really fully comprehend the size of the world and the population.
Right. He worked with their ideas of where they thought that this was it. This is the world as we know it. And used that to relay the fact that how, for example, with the flood, how great and damaging it was, while still, so he was still being true while at the same time working with the misunderstood culture that they had and their knowledge. And the same thing then works with the Tower of Babel, of that people that was in that region to then relay an important truth. Because mind you, the person writing this account is not someone from that event. The person writing the account was Moses, who doesn't appear until Exodus. So he's much after these events in Genesis.
Right.
And so all he's getting is the oral tradition of the stories. And of course, being God inspired, that this is definitely something that could be seen as true and part of a good tradition for y'all.
Okay. Yeah, that interesting.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so y'all in the chat, feel free to ask questions. We only got one person asking a question, and I hadn't seen him ask for the link yet. Is Catholic Dude. What's your view on the miracle of Fatima, whereby the sun was seen to move out of its location in the sky and spin all over the sky? So he's saying that the sun was seen to move out of its location in the sky and spin all over the sky. Of course, we're dealing with eyewitnesses here, and of course, when talking about Fatima, especially dealing with like the whole the Lady of Fatima miracles, quote unquote, concerning people saying that they believe that they have seen Mary essentially at these areas that they managed to actually see what she is and what she's able to do. And so there's a lot of problems, of course, in regards to that. And in fact, I'm trying to actually see if I can find.
On top of that being the fact that Miriam is dead.
Yeah. Let me see here. There's actually a section here in this article. In a series of alleged Marian apparitions in Fatima, Portugal in 1917, approved by the Vatican, Mary is claimed to have said, quote, "Are you willing to offer yourselves to God and bear all the sufferings he wills to send you as an act of reparation for the conversion of sinners?" It is also said, "Jesus wants to use you to make me known and loved. He wishes to establish the devotion of the devotion to my immaculate heart throughout the world. I promise salvation to whoever embraces it." And this supposed Mary said, quote, "I will never forsake you. My immaculate heart will be your refuge and the way that will lead you to God." And continued. And then it doesn't stop there. It continued saying, "Sacrifice yourselves for sinners and say many times, especially when you make some sacrifice, oh Jesus, it is for love of you, for the conversion of sinners, and in reparation for the sins committed against the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And you have seen hell, where the souls of poor sinners go to save them. God wishes to establish in the world devotion to that's Mary, my Immaculate Heart." And there's, of course, more and more that we're getting, and you can find all these in Marian Apparitions, the Bible and the Modern World, published in 2002 from Donald Anthony Foley.
Okay. What?
Yeah.
Especially the part where she talks about herself. Just that makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, even Miriam acknowledged God's authority.
Yep.
It's just what the. I'm trying not to curse. I'm trying not to curse here.
Just calm down. Just calm down, man. Just calm down, man.
I mean, I'm sorry. That was a demon. That was not Mary.
personally, I wouldn't even say it's a demon. I'd say it's just these people that are just, delusional, and it's probably due to, probably had some Catholic influence or something like that. But yeah, like,
Oh, ouch.
well, I mean, the idea is that, like, oh, because you see a lot of the whole thing that goes out there, and what you got is like, because you could tell based on this, as well as what we can actually go to other doctrines and statements, they did have a lot of, theologies and doctrines that does make Mary to be a whole, almost viewed as a god. In fact, the article from Keith Thompson, Roman Catholicism Turns Mary into a God, points it out by where they say that where the Catholic Church wants us to make Mary our life. In the Catechism, it says that she is queen over all things. The Catholic scholar Alphonsus Liguori says that Mary is the peacemaker between sinners and God. As well as, yeah, and then Lumen Gentium, which is his document of Vatican II, Mary is the, quote, most holy mother of God, which, of course, there's the statements of the issue of indeed being the mother of Jesus, who is God, but of course there's an extent where they go with that title. Mind you, this comes from Liguori again, so he's another scholar and he wrote a book called The Glories of Mary, where he goes over all this stuff, like saying, quote, Mary delivers her clients from hell. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says the Church's devotion to the Blessed Virgin is intrinsic to Christian worship. So the Christian worship of Jesus, it's intrinsic in the same way concerning the devotion to Mary, and says the Church rightly honors the Blessed Virgin with special devotion. Let's see. Catechism also says that she's the believer's helper. So there's like a lot that you can get into, as well as the part where it believes that, she is well, of course, just other kinds of problems, like the idea that she actually helped and participated in the atonement of sins for the forgiveness of believers.
Well,
How?
I don't know.
How's that possible?
Hold up. Let Ava comment on this one. I'm curious because this is the thing. He identifies as Catholic, but yet at the same time does seem to deviate away from some of the doctrines, and Liz leaning more towards Calvinism. So there's a benefit for me.
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with all of that. Well, not all. I mean, the thing is, God chose Mary for a reason. She was the chosen mother to birth Jesus Christ, his son.
Right.
So it's not like she's some random woman who, oh my goodness, why are we worshiping her?
Right.
She was a very significant individual.
Right, and I would, of course, agree with that. But there is an extent, though, with how the Catholics do, where, because, I mean, they would just basically, all she is like, I would agree with, like, the mother of a God. That would probably be the main thing I would go with because of the issue of the son of Jesus.
Right.
That I definitely have no problem with. But the idea of Mary being the peacemaker between sinners and God, which goes to the doctrine of that you could pray to Mary and Mary can, she's the intermediator between you and God for, sins and prayer, even though the Bible says only Jesus is that mediator. And Mary never puts herself in this position. And then the Fatima statements, I mean, and they're stating that this is how Mary is in their view, that she is, that the mission of her revealing themselves is saying Jesus wants you to make Mary known and loved, and to establish devotion to her immaculate heart throughout the world, and saying that I, Mary, promise salvation to whoever embraces my immaculate heart. So it's definitely all about, and that's just the other thing I noticed, like a lot of the new developing doctrines in Catholicism, there's a pattern that all seems to get involved. They all seem to center around Mary or get involved about Mary at some point with these new doctrines or anything that Rome starts establishing. And I think this is something that's problematic, and one of the key essentials concerning Mary is that in Catholicism, she is put on a much higher status than how people like me, for example, would view her, and that is that she was a humble individual who accepted her task in giving birth to the Lord, to the Messiah, and that's it. She was no assistant, co-redeemer. She was no person that is able to offer salvation or participate in salvation, or someone who's able to answer all the prayers that are addressed to her, or even deliver clients from hell, as the Glories of Mary from Alphonsus Liguori points out. I mean, I think a good bit of this can be very problematic, especially when y'all start saying that, and the Catechism of the Church says that the devotion to Mary is intrinsic to Christian worship, and the Church honors the Virgin Mary with special devotion, and put it in the same way. That's kind of how you do it with the worship we offer to Jesus, who is God.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to get into like a debate or anything.
I know.
How are these guys not committing idolatry at this point?
Well, I don't know, man.
It depends on the category. That's why there's people like Ave, and I've met others like him before, that, you know, would be, they say they're Catholic, but when it comes, if you ask them, you know, did they affirm papal infallibility or the Marian dogmas, they'll immediately say, oh no, I don't believe in that. And those two ladies, Jade and Fiona, unfortunately Jade has passed away from us, and she was certainly a saint, if I would ever actually say one, because she was a very patient woman, and was able to endure with a lot of us through the crap we've done through our lives. So like there's people like Fiona, Jade, and then of course recently that I've met that would be Catholic and yet don't seem to be fully into the dogmas of Rome. And I think that's definitely where I would consider people like Ave and Fiona my brothers and sisters in Christ, concerned, and that they wouldn't be committing Mariolatry or idolatry at that point.
Mariology.
I mean,
Mariolatry, yeah.
To be honest, though,
watch out, hey, don't look.
Wait,
but I think just arrived.
Okay, I just got lost out of all this. Abe was definitely trying to say some, Engine mentioned something, and then all of a sudden I hear what I thought was going to be a Indiana Jones joke for a second. When I heard "don't look."
I mean, like, you know, being growing up Catholic, going to Catholic school, I've been taught my Hail Marys, and I have prayed to her. You know, that's just what I've done. So that's, and I do regard her as a saint. You know,
right. I got no problem with the idea of the whole saint, of regarding it as a saint. Just, of course, I have a different understanding and definition of that, but I would definitely agree that, yeah, she would be a Christian, a person that's definitely worthy of some respect, but not in the, you know, high excessive degrees that modern Rome puts on Mary today. I think that's being a little too excess, but, you know, I know every Catholic church does it differently concerning how they approach it.
Yeah,
not as bad as turning Mary Magdalene into a whore.
I mean, either way, they kind of do make it with, if you especially have the Mary of the Fatima thing, where she's basically saying, according to these supposed apparitions, as we mentioned earlier, supposedly they heard her say, Jesus wants y'all to make my legacy known, and therefore to, you know that I can save you from your sins. This is what they supposedly heard Mary say in 1917 in Fatima. But again, that's another story. But anyways, that was the Catholic dude that asked that question. Let's see, we have others.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the salvation of souls is a more serious matter other than whether someone is mischaracterized.
Yeah. So, All right, so I think that's the only one we haven't been having too much in the live chat for questions lately, but we've been certainly having some stuff. But anyways, let's see here. Trying to see if no, I have messaged this guy before. All right. Anyways, just checking some DMs, and I just realized my Twitter is off. I did not mean to do that. Probably missing out on a lot of people asking for links, or fortunately not. And oh my goodness, someone put an. I'm gonna have to look it out. Someone made a meme of me on Twitter with some song. And what's this band that I'm gonna have to take a look at? GOT7. Who in the world is? Oh goodness gracious! It's that Korean stuff. It's that Korean pop band stuff. So I'm in for a treat.
What are they poking fun at you for?
It's not poking fun at me. It's I made a dare that people on Twitter, because there was a video from the time I was at Louisiana, and I did one scene where I'm challenging this random dude to a dance battle, and I just show off some break dancing, and I found out that you could actually just play any song to my dancing and it would match up. And so this person did this, and she said the dance actually fits well with this, because I was testing it myself, and I was like playing the Disrespect Your Surroundings song, Deja Vu, I Have Been in This Place Before, that's Epic Sax Guy music, like anything I could try to find, and it worked. Like every part of like the thing would just match up somehow with some of the beats to it. So I told people, hey, if y'all want, put some music to this and make this a funny meme. And apparently someone's keeping the spirit of it alive. So I'm going to give it a like and a retweet.
Okay.
So I'm gonna check it out later though. All right. So
since Injin made it here, I guess we should indulge him a question.
Who?
Injin, since he came in here and Abe just asked a question, so it's only fair that Injin ask one now.
Wait, I thought it was a Catholic dude that asked the question.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
Never mind.
We kind of got off track on talking about a bunch of different things, and I totally lost track of whose turn it was and what was happening.
Well, I think it would. That's what I was thinking, because before I wanted to make sure that you were done with the question. So I remember. I think that we did get off. And oh my goodness, like that person that made the meme just wanted to. She was in here saying that. We'll say I did find some old footage of you and edited it. It's been tweeted to you. You liked it. Okay, I'm gonna have to check it out later. Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna just start up on the lineup, starting with Zachary, and then work our way down the order. So,
all right.
Yeah. So, what's your question, Zach?
Yeah. Another question I put on Discord. What is Molinism, and how do you think it lines up with Scripture?
Okay, what is Molinism, and how do I think it lines up with Scripture? Really, I don't really understand Molinism concerning why some people take that position. I actually was going with someone in a mock debate kind of thing where someone was taking the position of Molinism, and I was trying to help someone. Right. Well, what I seem to get from the mock debate discussion that I had is that Molinism seems to believe that, there is a sense of free will, and then there's a sense of things that are determined, but ultimately the main factor in all of this is that God has some sort of middle knowledge. And this is basically, middle knowledge, basically saying that there's something that, God has, knowledge that's, you have like foreknowledge, things of knowledge are able to come into that are future, like foreknowledge being that he knows you're going to sleep at whatever time you plan to sleep tonight. But then along with that, you have middle knowledge, which is basically if you were to put us in different worlds or scenarios, he would know the multiple outcomes or the different outcomes for this. And so when it comes to middle knowledge, the verses they go to, and there's of course, again, on our playlist, on the Debates and Dialogues playlist, I actually talked with a Molinist that was part of the online team for William Lane Craig's Reasonable Faith website. And we talked about Molinism on Modern Day Debate. And what was even funny is like, because we had the atheist Shannon Q on there, and so when she's here and the Calvinist and the Molinist, like it was nothing but like jaw dropped, like, okay, so many questions. And so it just was very interesting that we were basically learning from each other. Me and this guy Tyson was his name, by the way, the Molinist. So I'd recommend that resource if anyone's wanting to look more into that. But that's ultimately the main factor. That's the main factor, is that it's about this middle knowledge concept, which is, if one situation would he do this, and what are the possibilities and all that. Basically, he just knows the different possibilities of those things.
That kind of does sound like William Lane Craig, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Not sure what it has to do with the atonement, though.
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't mention much on it. It's just about the issue of the knowledge of God, ultimately.
Okay. Okay.
All right, thank you for your question there, Mike. All right, so let's go to Religious Fanboy with our next question.
I've been studying Judges kind of as I've been listening to the conversation.
Yeah.
Do you think part of the reason why in the Old Testament, when the children of Israel were taking back the Promised Land, do you think the reason why God had commanded them to force the citizens out of the Promised Land was to help them avoid being tempted by those other nations?
Well, I think the main thing why they drove them out is not necessarily because of to get them to avoid the temptation, because they could just as easily have gone over to those areas as well. I think the main reason why is because this was essentially land that was promised to them by God, and that this was the way to take and establish the land, as is seen by other instances of Scripture wherever they get into the conquests. As I mentioned, John Walton, in his book on the Israelite conquests, goes over some of these details and explains this. So, by the way, if you definitely want a good resource on that, I would recommend finding that from either InterVarsity Press or some Christian book distributor online for a good price on that book. But when it comes to it, ultimately, the reason why they did that wasn't to try to necessarily do something good for the other people. Was also basically good for themselves, to get land that would be established for their people to survive and to thrive and to have a place to live and to have a home.
Not to mention the iniquities were pretty much at their peak by then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, anyways, but is that it? Oh, okay. Thank you for your question.
And I'll definitely check out the John Walton sources. And if you guys do come across URLs for those sources, just in your guys' research, I'd appreciate URLs if you have the time to send them.
Yeah, for Walton there isn't, but I'm sure there's some commentaries that you can find that'll have it.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
No problem. All right, now thank you for that. Onward to the Ave, who is a candy of a corn of a dog. I'm gonna shut up now.
Oh, my question already? I thought.
It's Zach and then Fanboy and then you and then because he came in later, it's History Net.
Right. Well, okay. Cool. So.
Don't make me come over there and boop you.
Oh darn! Whatever shall I do?
There you go.
But yeah. So this is an interesting thought that I had. We know that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. He is the Son of God. And Jews do not believe that. And they're still waiting for the Messiah. What do you think would happen if there was an individual who the vast majority of Jews in the world actually believed was their Messiah? Like, what would happen? Politically, socially? Like, what would that be like?
Well, as far as what that would be like, it would... again, of course, depend on the culture and the region because everyone depicts and understands Jesus differently. I mean, we've had people that would later on accept the Messiah, whether it be from a Jewish or a Gentile perspective. The Jews, of course, have their way of doing it. And we can see this with Messianic Jews and how they understand the Messiah. And then, of course, some of them prefer to call him Yeshua. Some of them prefer to just say Jesus. And then some of them, while saying that you don't need to practice this, they'll still practice some of their Jewish festivals because they point out how these festivals, reflect Christ, and that's beneficial for them. And sometimes some of the lands in the cities show this kind of reflection. But then you also have, say, the different lands that have a different perspective on Jesus and his teachings. So, but ultimately, let's just say this: if the majority of people affirm that he was the Messiah, what would it look like? Ultimately, what you would have is a bunch of people that accept the truth of the saving message of the Messiah and would, based on how I believe.
I don't think you understood the question. I was saying if there were a person who existed right now who was not Jesus or anything like that, but people believed it.
Oh, okay.
Like what? Like if Jews, because Jews are waiting for the Messiah. What if there was somebody out there who Jews actually did believe was the one they were waiting for, the Messiah for them? That's what I'm asking.
All right. By the way, I apologize that I misunderstood that. That was definitely my bad there.
Right.
So when it comes to that is a good question because they still are waiting for it and they think it's going to be some sort of militarist type of leader or some kind of like earthly king or ruler.
They were expecting a warrior, a conqueror like David.
Pretty much, yeah. So when it comes to that, if there was one today that was not actually the Messiah, but people thought he was, and the majority just affirmed that, then ultimately what we just have is a bunch of people, kind of following after people in the same way that it would look kind of like in Muhammad's time, when it came to Muhammad being viewed as this prophet of greatness and people still carrying out that legacy today and trying to honor Muhammad. So we could probably see something like that since the Jewish perspective, at least the modern Jewish.
Then there's Joseph Smith.
Well, the difference is that Joseph Smith wasn't a warrior, wouldn't be viewed as one, as you pointed out. That the Jews are expecting a warrior out of their Messiah, whereas concerning the Quran and the Hadith,
I thought you were comparing frauds.
We're talking about how would the Messiah, that especially like the Jews, and then the majority of people would talk about viewing somebody. What would it look like? And it would look like how we have it almost today, where especially you have some people that are just going to be following after this man. And note, Joseph Smith's writings aren't the main things. Like, they don't talk about his personal letters or sermons as much, even though they do have authority. But when it comes to the issue of us Christians, we believe in the Messiah's words concerning Jesus. And then the same could go for the Jews when they believe that they have their Messiah. So whoever this figure is, they'll go to him, just like the Muslims have their prophet with the Hadith, that believe that in order to follow Islam perfectly well, you have to also follow after Muhammad's teachings, which you get from the Hadith, which are the collections of his sayings and his actions and his deeds. So when it comes to that, it would kind of be in a similar way because again, they viewed Muhammad as a warrior, and so the people would view this guy as a warrior, and so they again view him as a king. They view him as this, and who knows? It could get to the point where politics then would get involved, especially considering the state that's going on over in Israel. So that could be a significant part there that would actually kind of be very much affected by it, and I don't know how and what way for the better or even for the worse to the point that war comes out. That I can't make a prediction on.
Wow. Yeah, I guess like what I would assume is that something like the papacy, only for the Jews, would be set up, where it's like this religious organization, and this individual is like head of it, and it would be much more, as you said, like involved in politics, possibly. Yeah, it'd be very interesting if that ever actually happened. If there was someone out there who the Jews believed was actually their Messiah. That's it's just an interesting hypothetical situation I was wondering about.
Oh, hey, at least we can try with the hypotheticals, right? At least we can at least postulate some stuff. But thank you for your question, by the way, my cool friendo. All right, now we go onward to White Engine.
Oh boy.
What's your question?
Oh boy. Okay. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 11, God said, did you already answer this one?
Concerning Exodus, repeat just to be sure. What's the
God said, in 6 days, Yahweh, your God, made the heavens and the earth.
Yeah, we went over the you're talking about Exodus 20:11.
Yeah. What was the answer?
The answer is that he's conforming to the culture, and the point is that he's not trying to relay accurate information about science and all that. He's trying to relay accurate information about theology. That's what God's more focused on in this whole thing is about.
And I added that the Hebrews, much like the rest of the ancient Near East, were not all that concerned with precision as they were with the actual point of what they are writing about.
Right.
Okay. Later, in Exodus chapter 34, verse 7, where God says that kids and grandkids are punished for the sins of their forefathers, how is that just?
Okay, so how is the part where it's mentioned in the law where it says that God has the kids and grandkids being punished for the sins of their forefathers? You're asking how is something that is established by the person who establishes the law, therefore is the definition of what is just, asking how that is just?
Like, how is it just that that sons and grandsons, daughters and granddaughters should...
Right, but you did understand what my question to you about it, and that was, right?
What was that again?
I'm saying, so you're asking me to answer you, how is it just that the person who is the definitive and establisher of what is the moral, what is right and wrong, where we get our morals from, you're asking me, how is that just?
Do you think it's just?
I'm thinking that concerning that covenant and the way that the laws have been established with God there, yeah, that what he has established there for those people at that time was just.
Keep in mind that you're an activist.
What?
Let me provide a link.
You got a link?
Yeah, James Patrick Holding covered this topic.
Yeah. All right, so is that in the YouTube thing there? All right, so...
Yeah, I provided a link in the group chat.
So,
yeah,
I mean...
keep in mind that people back then were all collectivists. They identified far more with the group than they did with the individual.
And for that, I would say just simply kind of echo the words of Paul in Romans chapter 9, verse 19 to 21, Thou wilt say then unto me, why doth he yet find fault? For who hath resisted his will? Nay, but, O man, who are thou? Who are you that replies against God? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, why hast thou made me thus? Hath not the potter power over the clay of the same lump to make one vessel into honor and another into dishonor? And the principle we can get from this is that God has the right to do with his creation as he wishes. He is the establisher of that. So who are you, oh man? Who are you, white engine, that to reply with God with that kind of question concerning what the text points out is that he is the one who establishes the law. So whenever we go to Exodus, I believe at 34, and point out the issue of these passages here, that 34 verse 7, when it says, and let's go over these. It's actually, well, it says verse 7, we have the issue of verse 5 being in parallel with the context, or it's pairing up here with the context. And the Lord descended into the cloud, stood, proclaimed the name of the Lord, and the Lord passed by before him and proclaimed, the Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abundant in goodness and truth. So these are the things about him. These are his attributes. Keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, and upon the children's children, and upon the third and to the fourth generation. And it's saying this because this whole thing that's going on here is
So
also
6 and 7 seems to be a giant
Hang on.
contradiction.
No, it's not actually, because when it comes to this, again, we know that God is a God of wrath, and that is clearly stated in the Bible. Nahum chapter 1, verse 2. God is jealous, and the Lord revengeth. The Lord revengeth and is furious. The Lord will take vengeance on his adversaries and reserve wrath for his enemies. So while we have God being merciful and loving, he's definitely loving and merciful to those who obey him and who adhere to him as Lord and that worship him. But when it comes to those who are willing to be in sin and put a curse upon their own family and all that, then yeah, he's definitely going to follow through with the punishment of the law and make no exception. He is not a favoritor of persons. He makes no exceptions or mercies on people concerning that period in which he's going to.
Yeah, and there's also the video by James Patrick Holding I put in the group chat and in the live chat. So
Yeah.
if you click on that, and it will contextualize this whole thing a bit more.
Yeah, even in a skit of it. So, anyways, so does that help out with your question there?
Sure, I'll take a look.
All right. All right, so thank you for your question there. We're going to take a look at then. Oh, my goodness. Taking a look at the YouTube live chat. And, of course, here comes Max, the Catholic fusionist, with his question, are traps gay? And you want to know something, my friend. They most certainly are, only if you are a class 3 weeaboo. Only then are they gay, because you know the secret and you know the truth of traps. It's pretty much how it all works.
That kind of reminded me of that video Hoploop did. It's raunchy. It's a bit raunchy, and it also goes to a bit of politics. But yeah, I'm not gonna provide the link. Just yeah.
There you go. Let's see. Ken McCracken. Do you think Paul is saying in Romans 9-11 that there will be a major turning of the Jews to Jesus before the end? I think that can certainly be seen in there at certain angles, because it does mention a hardening. It does refer back to the hardening of Israel a bit. And then, we have the heart of flesh. And then we have, that these same people that could be viewed, it's like, clay. There could be some that are in that hardened Israel. And there are some that are there, the remnants of Israel, that are then able to be unto salvation. So That being said, and Ken also points out, I think in Exodus it says, "Of those who hate me," the implication is that the wickedness is learned from their parents, and these generations hate God. So, in other words, the people that was in that verse that was mentioned, history, was about people that would continue to proceed and learn from their parents the sin that would be of the hatred towards God, and therefore the generation carries on of a continuous generation of God, I hate you. Then the child comes, oh God, I hate you too. So kind of thing. Right. So let's see. But so far
You're not my dad, God.
Well, unfortunately, he is the father. So there we go. Yeah. Anyways, so we don't have anyone in the live chat asking too much questions as usual. We only come back to about one. Someone was asking if we were based on the thumbnail. I guess the thumbnail at some point was of that picture from Superbook I was showing, which in a way, yeah, we did kind of talk about it. But yeah, let's see. Any others that come up? Wow, there's a lot from well, Ken McCracken at one point earlier said, didn't Pope Francis have a meeting with some high-ranking Muslim cleric recently? I'm not sure. I would have to have, because I don't pay too much attention to the whole Catholic news thing there. Max asks again, monarchy, yay or nay?
Nay.
I am not.
Yay.
I am not into the whole thing of. To me, I think our democratic government is already having some problems. Well, I don't think monarchy is going to even solve it, especially since we can't even be involved in how that works. Yeah. And Max did, by the way, I guess this helps answer Ken's question, that indeed he did. This is a quote Max here. He did. It sucked. So there you go. Catholics say that it sucked when the fact that I guess the Pope ended up meeting up with the high-ranking Muslim cleric.
Yeah. Towards monarchy, yay or nay. Yeah. I'm going to pull a full Hoplo and go, nay.
There you go. Max saying Pope Francis said God wills a diversity of religions. Yeah, that is that is bad.
No, he doesn't. No, that's wrong.
Yeah, he tolerates some. That does not mean he wills that they stay.
There you go.
I'm pretty sure that's like one of the commandments. Like,
yeah, thou shalt not have other gods.
Other god before me. Like,
and Max,
pretty clear.
And Max
they worship the same Almighty God.
No, Muslims and Christians do not worship the same Almighty God.
They worship different versions of the same God.
They worship a false version.
And it's not even the same God. I mean, Christians are Trinitarian. Muslims are Unitarian.
Yeah. In fact, that's
some see God as Unitarian, and some others see as Trinitarian, and
right. Some quote unquote Christians say he's Unitarian. They again deny what the Bible says, and in fact, there's actually a video I'm going to play here for you from the Lutheran Satire. It's called "Do Christians and Muslims Worship the Same God?"
Yes.
And this will answer the question quite clearly, and hopefully there won't be of much confusion to you. So we'll let me first again get the audio here, because again that's the problem with the thing here, is that I have to pull the video up on YouTube on the computer, whereas the other thing has to come from my phone, and I have to time them out accurately. So here it is, folks. We're going to present the deal breaker of the question: do Christians and Muslims worship the same God? Here we go.
It's a little more straightforward than that.
Here we go.
You don't gotta do that.
Hold up.
Hey, look, there's a God I worship. Is that the God you worship? Nope. Oh, okay.
Problem solved.
Self-explanatory.
Oh, there we
You
go.
really don't get any more clear than that.
Yeah, nope.
You worship the same God, but they don't worship the
No, you just
form
heard him.
that
We
God
don't
took.
worship the same God, though.
They don't worship the form that God took.
Right, they don't
2,000
worship
years
the
ago.
actual. They don't mean that the form that he took, meaning they don't worship the actual God.
They don't worship the human form of God.
They don't worship
No,
God. They worship
it's
a
not
false
human
God.
form. Stop invoking modalism. Modalism's not a biblical doctrine.
Yeah,
Was JMD modalist, or was he just entertaining the idea?
he's not saying or entertaining the idea of modalism. I think again, this for some of the aspects you seem to again misunderstand certain Christians when you engage in this stuff. Just like whenever people say,
I was just asking. He tossed
right,
me.
and I'm asking, and I'm answering your question there, but I'm also pointing out where the error is in your understanding of some of them. Like when people try to explain the Trinity, you take it a step further and kind of go to a different direction. Either that, or you're focusing on some kind of liberal German scholar and how he understands things. Which again, there's a lot of problems with some of the people up there that they can't make consistent theological distinctions or arguments for their point.
Now, I would say
I
that
think Luke
that
Protector made a
Jews
video
worship the
about
same God.
how people misconstrue the Trinity.
I'm not gonna lie, I managed to hear both what Ave and Zach said in that same point.
Well, I wasn't finished. I said I think that Jews do worship the same God, but they're just being stubborn about things that happened later on.
Well, there are certainly some Jews that do, but that's the other thing too that's interesting is that the concept of Jewish understanding of God was different back then than what it is now. A lot of them are just Unitarians. Back then, there was some binitarian theology.
Right.
In the Kabbalah Jewish thought, you had a 50 in one idea actually for some of the aspects due to the Sufiro. So they viewed all the components in the Kabbalah as being part of this divine God. And so you could see how that would then help out with Trinitarians, especially the early Jews who were Trinitarians. That would be Jesus and all that. What's so funny?
That cartoon you showed me just laid it out simply.
Yeah, they don't worship the same God as us.
Nope.
It was just a direct question. It pointed to Jesus on the cross, saying, "Do you worship that?" Like, nope. Oh, okay.
Exactly, because that's the deal breaker. If they don't worship Jesus, they don't worship the same God. Jesus made it plain as day during his teachings on earth.
But okay, hold on though. That's getting back to my main point of what I said about Jews worshiping the same God. Now it's very clear that God himself did in fact reach out to people like Moses. At the time, there was no Jesus, so there was no way they could possibly worship Jesus Christ at the time.
Right.
Nowadays, like I said, I just think they're being stubborn and they're just not accepting reality.
What's actually interesting though is that in a way they did know him, though he didn't. The way that it would be basically is that we know who Jesus is based on the New Testament, but there's also a concept that would seem to be like a parallel to the Son, like the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, where we have the Yahweh, the angel of Yahweh, and the Spirit of Yahweh. And this angel of Yahweh that gets mentioned in the Bible is not only someone that seems to be the second Yahweh, as some Jewish scholars note, but he's able to interact with his people. So when, for example, Abraham being an example, whenever Abraham goes to see that, Sodom is about to be destroyed, who's he standing there talking to? Because he keeps calling him God or Yahweh, yet it's called the angel of Yahweh. And so this is a person in the very first time that they get to introducing each other, earlier on in the chapter, they're sitting down and eating together. They're having a meal. So this is the person he calls Yahweh, and this Yahweh individual is eating food and then of course blesses Abraham's wife with a child, even though she was unable to bear children. But now she was able to due to a miracle. So that again shows how that is indeed God. And then God casting judgment while standing right next to Abraham. And then another instance where I believe it's Genesis 32, where Jacob wrestles with God, like he physically is wrestling and fighting with God, and God has to, or God then punches Jacob in the ribs to dislocate his shoulder, and then dislocate his shoulder and get him in a grip to.
And then the thigh, which is a fun
Yeah.
fact. That's the reason that the Hebrews refrained from eating chicken thighs.
Well, do you think that's actually like a physical form of God, or could it possibly be angelic possession?
Well, it's based on the Jewish writings that we have. There are some that just think that it's just a regular angel, but they believe that but some point out that it's something called the Metatron, and that this is basically God that is able to be in the flesh or have some angel form that is physical and is able to dwell with us in a certain space, while at the same time still able to be everywhere at once as Yahweh, especially the one that's in the heavens that we would call the Father or just simply the Lord. So, and that again just shows not only him being able to be everywhere, but also the extreme scope of his limitless ability to be at places.
Yeah,
So,
fun fact: this wrestling is also where we get the term Yisrael, which means struggle with God.
Yeah, that's basic.
Because that was the thing he was saying. What is your name? And he says Jacob is like, from now on, your name will be Israel, which means to wrestle with God. And of course, he asks who he was, and he just kind of like, like foolish Jacob, you should know by now. I'm paraphrasing there, and then as he left, Jacob then thinks about it, and he's like shocked and says, "Oh my God, I just managed to look at God face in the face, yet here I am still breathing." Because back then, especially if we remember Moses on Mount Sinai, if you were to look at God with like the gloriness of God and all that he had, you would die just straight up there, because you would be way too much shocked at all the glory and holiness that he had. And so that was why it was so shocking that he said that he saw God, but yet was still able to live to tell the tale. And so, yeah.
That's pretty. I gotta say that's pretty freaking cool. Like,
Mm-hmm.
imagine being that guy who wrestled with God. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
like, wow.
And so that would be how some Jews that converted to Christianity viewed Jesus. That was basically him before he would then become Jesus, being born as him incarnate.
That's not the same.
And the individual that talked to Moses.
That's not the same thing, though. That's not even close.
Well, that's the thing. Again, it depends on the Jew and the person, but there are some people that's how they were convinced to become Christians, because they saw that Jesus had the claims that he was divine and eternal, and that he's been there since the beginning, especially with Abraham, and that's when
and John makes it clear that Jesus was the Logos.
Yeah, the Logos. Yeah. So again, it depends. I don't think that it's necessary or definite that people affirm what I was just saying there, because again, that was just some Jews and how they came to that conclusion based on their understanding of early Jewish tradition. But yeah. Anyways, so we definitely got off a bit there, but yeah, I think we established the point. Muslims do not worship the same God. So there you go. That being said, let's take a look at what we got with y'all in the live chat. Let's see.
RC, it sounds like you got a little bit of an echo going on.
I think that'd be coming from a engine.
Oh.
Let me try some. Oh. Yep, that was him. Okay. There we go. Let's see here. see.
Kim McCray asked,
Huh?
What do you think Christians' attitude should be towards atheists who use their YouTube channels to blaspheme God and ridicule the Bible? Some go on these channels. Yeah, I'm gonna give my answer. Me, I just shake my head and go, moron.
Ooh, this should be interesting because the part he mentions is he actually addresses the biblical history skeptics. He said, I saw a recent video on Biblical History Skeptics channel, which was particularly gratuitously blasphemous. Chris is a nice guy, but this was disturbing, I think. So I would have to see
what was disturbing.
I don't know. Ken's going to have to explain what that was because the question is Ken's asking us is what our attitude should be towards atheists who use their YouTube channels to blaspheme God and ridicule the Bible.
Chris doesn't really blaspheme God. He just thinks that Yahweh was originally a minor desert god or something.
Right, but I don't know if that's it or not because he said he saw in a recent video on the channel that something that Chris did was particularly gratuitously blasphemous, according to Ken. So Ken.
Oh yeah, there's some other guy on there that joined us. That was they had their read throughs of the Bible. Now they're doing Genesis. Some guy was doing his doing a really whatchamacallit voice when he was talking about the passages where God speaks.
What do you mean? What kind of voice?
And the Lord said unto Moses. Stuff like that.
Oh, so you're trying to impersonate like televangelists or something? And the Lord said unto Moses, "Oh, Lordy, Lordy."
No,
like that.
I'm trying to do the voice of God you hear in the Ten Commandments, kind of like that.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, the movie. Yeah. Well, I mean,
he said it's the most recent one on Chris's channel, which is about Abraham.
Yeah, they're talking about some custom where somebody in the village had to put their hand on his thigh when he was dying. I forgot exactly what it was, but
right. Well, I mean,
I don't know of anything really blasphemous, but
and there's definitely been some very good movies out there that do, at least I would say, do justice to the voice of God. For instance, in The Prince of Egypt, when Moses talks to God, I mean, that's just a really powerful and beautiful scene. And it's not meant to be blasphemous at all. It really is just
they're trying to. Well, for example, in the Ten Commandments as well, this would include that they're trying to just do. They're not trying to go over exaggerating and make something like as we would do if we would hear that kind of voice. Our whole purpose, or their purpose, is just to establish something that's original, and to just give something they think would be something you may sound like. But they're not trying to be too overdramatic about it.
Like in Ten Commandments, Charlton Heston did provide his own voice for that.
Right, because Charlton Heston is involved in a lot of Christian films and documentaries at that time. So it was, and I think they even did a thing where he read where he was doing a reading of the Bible, so people could have the Holy Bible read by Charlton Heston.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing with what's Darth Vader. I forget his name at the moment.
James Earl Jones.
Yeah, James Earl Jones, because I've seen a couple of DVDs or CDs that have him narrating the Bible.
That's an interesting. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
There you go. So when it comes to that,
Steve,
But like when someone tries to just do it for some dramatic effect, especially on something that, I mean,
then there's there's comedic performances like in Dogma.
Okay, he said because I tried to ask to see what he was talking about, and he said the whole thing is meant to deride these accounts in Genesis. Watch the video and see what you think. So he's asking me to watch it, see what I think. And
they're skeptics.
Right, exactly, and he thinks that there are some, and to him that's just problematic. And I think that, again,
That's what
Christians
skeptics do.
right, and I think Christians shouldn't entertain such ideas of these.
Well, they can. People should listen to them, but
we should listen to arguments, but as far as to entertain certain ideas, like some Christians that entertain the JEPD theory by thinking that the documentary hypothesis,
it's not confliction with
the documentary hypothesis is
not really. It'll just dispel the misconception that Moses wrote the Torah,
which would then discount what the Bible itself claims.
The Bible itself does not claim that.
Moses did not write
there's
Torah.
There's one time where Jesus said Moses wrote about me, but that he could have written bits and pieces of the originals, and it should be common sense that the
Are you sure about that? Because as far as Jesus, as well as others in the Old Testament,
I just said that.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is that they mention that, and that there is no reason to think that they are having some sort of lying or doubts.
There's bits and pieces that real Moses probably wrote, but
there's a majority actually,
and the majority got compiled over time.
The majority is actually what he wrote, and it's only a minor bit that was of either from, the scribe Joshua, and then of course he would write Joshua, the book of Joshua, and then other people that would mention minor like scribal things, like for example when it uses things that are anachristic. These are of course, as scholars note, things that just come in from later editorial things, but they're not really anything significant. This is something that Gordon Wenham notes in the ESV study Bible on his notes concerning the JEPD theory.
Oh, where else is that? Where else did he write about that?
Huh?
Where else did he write about that? Gordon Wenham.
That's all I really know on concerning that, because he deals with the he tackles that in the introduction that he had. But yeah, as far as the whole thing, even as Umberto Cassuto, who is a Italian Jewish scholar, notes that things like differences in language, and all these other things, he says the following: we must not rely upon the differences in language in order to determine the origin of the sections, which we shall subsequently use to decide the linguistic characteristics of the sources, for in that case we shall indeed fall into the snare of reasoning.
Don't you find it fishy that divinely inspired texts have to have an editorial process?
Not again.
Well, no. Here's the thing, though: they're divinely inspired, but that means that a human has to write it. So yeah, of course, there's going to be some editorial, differences, between translations and whatnot. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and God is allowed to use these editorial changes for His will.
Exactly.
So we may not have the Torah as it may originally have been first composed and written down, but we have ultimately the text of the Bible. We ultimately have the same text that God wants us to have, and these small, like, little textual variants that would be in there, they do not affect the overall meaning and message that God is trying to relate in the Torah.
And this is a very good argument against the idea that Muslims and Christians worship the same God, because if you look at the Quran, the God in the Quran is completely different than the one in the Bible.
Not that much
totally different rules.
Not that much different.
Everything.
They are different.
The Jewish version and the Muslim version are both wrathful, vengeful, and hot-tempered.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have.
No, but I'm talking about rules, though, like rules of how to live. It's completely different.
And Allah being Unitarian, and the idea of that, you have to follow after specifically the way that Muhammad, not just, of his teachings, but how he even dressed, how he behaved. So in other words, hit women. Yeah, we'll allow that. Dress just like him, including do not shave the under part of your beard. Do not touch that at all if you're a man.
Yeah, all of that. Like, all that, not like, it's just totally.
So yeah, there's a lot that's definitely different than concerning that. In fact, Keith Thompson recently did a video and article concerning the major differences between Jesus and his apostles versus Muhammad and his companions, showing how these two are completely different religions and how the gods are completely different things. I mean, because I know you like apologetics ministries concerning his work on Aaron Ra, you will definitely love his work on Islam when he points out how such a perverted false religion Islam is and how its God is false.
David Wood already did that quite well when he compared Paul and Muhammad in a series.
David Wood's in the documentary.
Which documentary?
Keith,
please tell me it's not 8 hours.
No, it's I think it's 2 or 3 hours. It's called The Sword and the Crescent, and David Wood was interviewed to answer some questions. And he appears at times in the documentary responding to.
Oh yeah, what do you mean is preparing a documentary?
Huh?
What do you mean is preparing a documentary?
Yeah. So, but going back to what we were talking about earlier, though, when it comes to that whole thing about the editors and all this sort of stuff, and the way that they're trying to use the whole thing to determine source. First of all, you cannot find me anywhere about a mention of a J source or an E source or any of these sources in.
Listen. When the United Kingdom of Israel fell and they split into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, wouldn't it stand to reason that they both had their own version of events of what happened in the past and then got stitched back together during the exile?
No, because I don't start with that. I don't start with that presupposition. I believe that God has preserved himself within the people. And again, that is a presupposition you start with. That is not a fact that they would have different ideas of who God is.
Reason. It's common sense. The North were vile people. The South were both good and bad. And they both had their versions of events.
Right. And other people say common sense says telephone game concerning the tradition of the New Testament. So again, I don't accept this idea of common sense being used as an argument. I am interested in facts. I'm interested in data. Do you have facts and data of a J source that was either in a manuscript form or that somebody in antiquity talked about?
That's why it's still a theory, but it's a pretty sound theory.
Exactly, and that's why it's from a liberal school of theories and scholarship that even was around during Lewis's time. As Lewis points out, people were trying to, while C.S. Lewis was alive, saying C.S. Lewis didn't write these Chronicles of Narnia books based off of certain literary things and differences in style of language.
Come on,
we think the sequel was actually written by somebody besides C.S. Lewis, and C.S. Lewis laughed at this.
That's stupid.
Exactly. That's how I view the documentary hypothesis. It's stupid. It's the same thing.
You really think that the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom were both consistent with their versions of what happened in the past?
No, well,
concerning the issue of God and what happened in the past and who was God. Yeah.
They disagreed on who was God. The Northern Kingdom of Israel treated Yahweh like an ordinary Canaanite god.
Can you show me documentation?
Documentation?
Yeah. Can you show me a primary source of history that documents that they viewed him as viewed him in the same way of a Canaanite god? Can you show me a source that provides that is primary?
Even the Bible Project knows this.
I'm asking you to provide me a primary source.
I don't have it right at my hand. I wasn't expecting to.
Right. So, but don't go making claims without evidence, though.
So I have to have a source on every single time I say something.
If you make a claim, a knowledge claim like that, right? Otherwise, like I could say, White Engine said he wants to cheat on his girlfriend, and you'd have to ask, or someone would have to ask, where did he say that? Like, well, wait, I have to have something that shows that. Do I have to have evidence or a source for that? You would expect and want me to have a source when I make some bold claims like that. So obviously,
you can read the book Israelite Religions. It's by a fairly conservative liberal scholar.
I'm sorry about that. Did you just say a conservative liberal scholar?
Yeah, one there's things he's conservative about and things he's liberal about.
That just makes him at this point just kind of a moderate. If he's on and off, I would just consider that to be a liberal scholar essentially, because I don't think there's that a conservative liberal is an oxymoron, in my opinion. I don't think that such a thing is possible of existing.
Not only that, but if you're going to say you could look up this or that or read this or that, that must mean that you have it yourself. So let's have it.
Yeah, but plus I have read my sources. I've read as I mentioned, the article from Gordon Wenham, the Biblical Theological Introduction to the Old Testament, where John D. Currid has commented on the issue of the documentary hypothesis. Emmanuel Tav even comments a bit on the whole thing, and while he may have an interest in liberal point of view, even he admits there's really not much evidence that we can go to that points and proves of this whole thing. The Dictionary of Old Testament from InterVarsity Press being another one. Even who was the leading scholar of his time before Michael Heiser came, Gleason Archer, said that there is definitely a lot of problems, and he's surprised that a lot of people.
Gleason Archer is fringe.
Fringe, really?
Yeah, he was not really that much respected by a majority of scholars.
Well, I heard different stories, so there you go.
And
you have Heiser himself. Heiser even says that really people are still believing this nonsense.
I mean, I understand where you're coming from when you say like the different kingdoms of Israel and Judah. Now, I would say that historically it's primarily based on politics. But either faction wants to think that their side is correct, and I'm sure there are people in those factions who are going to use religion to their advantage. But that doesn't mean that they don't, like they're not all following the same religion, and they're just using it differently for their political ideology.
Right. And so, again, I've looked into this. I even have a commentary, forget what it is, HarperCollins Bible commentary, and it utilizes scholars that promote this JEPD or the documentary hypothesis in general, and they just base it off of, for example, like the J in the E source. The popular usage of this is, well, one says sometimes when they say Yahweh, and then there's times they say Elohim. Okay, when it says Yahweh, that means it's from a group of people that believe in a God whose name is Yahweh, and that when they say Elohim, this is a separate, different religious group or different group of people that believe the true name of God was Elohim.
But it's the same God.
Right. So the issue is that no, it's not the different religions or different groups. They're the same people. There's just times that they call him Yahweh, and then there's times they call him Elohim. In fact, there's actually something that was from Daniel Block in the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary, where he points out why there's the calling him of a different or not. Was it him, or was it someone else that mentions why the names were called differently? Let me see if I can actually. Oh yeah, it was Umberto Cassuto, because Umberto Cassuto wrote a book called The Documentary Hypothesis, where it was a book dedicated to refuting and debunking and demolishing it. And unfortunately, so some people still cling to this crazy theory. He said in page 31, it selected the name Yahweh when the text reflects the Israelite conception of God, which is embodied in the portrayal of Yahweh and finds expression in the attributes traditionally ascribed to him by Israel, particularly in his ethical character. It preferred the name Elohim when the passage implies the abstract idea of the deity prevalent in the international circles of wise men. So there's another reason for why it uses that kind of language. So again, this textual criticism that is being utilized for this is a very slippery slope that if we were to actually utilize, as was noted by the Christian apologist Warwick Montgomery, that you could actually do that with scholars today and think that, this scholar actually didn't write his book. So I could do the same thing with, say, for example, Michael Heiser. I could do a critical type of thing and try to look for styles and differences, or John Walton, and say, John Walton didn't really write this book, or Michael Heiser didn't really write this particular book because it differs from his previous work.
Yeah, it just sounds so arbitrary. It's kind of hard to take it seriously at this point. Why did I even talk about the documentary hypothesis in my research paper regarding the Exodus?
Right. And again, just because a bunch of people affirm that the theory is true doesn't mean that it is, because you would affirm that an Exodus existed, I would assume, as Christianity, has that being the case.
I see the Exodus as I see the Trojan War, and it happened, but it doesn't seem to be as on a grand scale as portrayed in the text.
Okay. But the point is that it happened, that the Exodus happened, and that what was written in the Bible happened. And so what we had there occurred, and that there is archaeological evidence, and there is archaeologists that would agree with this, but
The majority of archaeologists don't think so.
correct. And so they are wrong.
Plus, it's argument about populum.
I think we're getting
Exactly.
a little bit off track here. When it
Yeah,
comes
we
to the whole,
did get a bit carried off, and
like
I'm
the
sorry for that.
difference between the factions in Israel. You know, one side called God this name, one side called it the other, and that really just has to do with political allegiance. It has nothing to do
No,
with
it's
what they
not the.
actually
I don't
believe.
buy the theory as presented by the. No, it's. I would.
Well, why not?
I say that each kingdom had their own versions of events what happened, and the Jews during the exile
yeah.
stitched them back together.
Yeah, of course they did. Well, of course they have their own versions of events. I mean, history is written by victors, and if you have a civil war and you split up, of course different, kingdoms are going to have their own unifying sort of history. But when it all comes down to it, at the end of the day, you can just look up historical fact and realize, the facts from both sides.
Okay, who's next?
So it is actually Pat. It's 11:07, but
I was going to ask my question.
Yeah, and that's why we're gonna just start over again, so that way to make up for, because that was my fault for getting us on that long discussion. But that is actually an interesting topic that I think is helpful there. But we're just gonna go to Zachary, Fanboy, Ave, and then White Engine, and we'll call it a night here. So whenever you're ready, Zach, send in your question.
Well, that's a little convenient because the final one on the Discord is the one I asked last, and it's in regards to that Eastern Orthodox stream earlier.
Yeah,
and it was directed at you. Did you understand that dribble about separation of the two natures? Because I did not get it at all.
Well, I'm still trying to learn and understand where they're coming at concerning that, because as I had learned, that Eastern Orthodoxy is definitely a very complicated religion, as I'm pretty sure you pointed out, or that you saw, because there are people that are Eastern Orthodox that accept the Apocrypha and even believe First Enoch is canon. But as we saw with what was mentioned to us in the Russian Orthodox Catechism of the Church, they affirm what us Protestants believe is canon. So they affirm the Protestant canon, and they base it on the same arguments that I'm making. And
yeah,
so there's and I'm like, well, that's interesting. I thought that was different. It's like, well, it's very different for a lot of people. So it depends again on who's that church that's part of it, and what role they play. So it really depends.
yeah.
So I mean, as far as that, I would have to, figure out and learn more from them, because I got to take a look at them books that was shown, that I said I had found out about, and he did mention one to me. So I'm gonna have to look into it and figure out what he means by that. But ultimately, what I think it is, or how I would kind of view it, the separation of the two natures is just that, Jesus has the divine nature, and that the human nature, of course, is able to. He has the human nature, so he's able to die, obviously, when he's in the human flesh, and that's how he had a death, and then, of course, a resurrection.
Yeah, and how can they argue that Reformed theology separates the two natures from each other, and thus destroys how was
Wait, is this something that I was talking about with the guy, or was this something you were talking about with a guy in the live chat?
Both.
Because I don't think he said anything about Reformed theology to me in there.
No, but I asked him a question about what these guys what those twats were even trying to say, and I tried to wrestle an answer out of them regarding how the two natures would even be separated to begin in with based on Reformed theology, and I never got a straight answer.
Right, because you're most likely dealing with a bunch of Jay Dyer fans, because it seemed that some of them just came to that chat because they, I don't know, they definitely like to see how I handle with Eastern Orthodox, and plus, you know, they just still kind of butthurt after my discussion with Jay, because I made Jay Dyer rage quit because he couldn't deal with the facts of history, and that's just all they're good for, is because all Jay does, that's where they're getting the rhetoric from, is says that Calvinism or Protestantism. At one point he said it's Nestorianism, or oh wait, now it's Marcionism, or now it's Arianism. Like, make up your dang mind. What is it? And so
none of that sounds believe at all.
Yeah. So it's just a bunch of rhetoric that's coming from some fanboys.
It's like, what is the relevance of all those heresies in regards to the Calvinist view of atonement?
Exactly.
Plus, Calvinism is from the 16th. Calvinism originated in the 16th century. Nestorianism is a lot earlier.
Right. He's saying that Calvinism is a repackaged version of Nestorianism.
How?
That's what I wanted to know, and that's it. Jay's already been refuted. There's a guy by the name of Turretin Fan who wrote plenty of articles refuting all of Jay's claims and how Jake really can't defend himself on those matters. But yeah, and that's why I was kind of glad to hear that from these guys that I was on. They say, "Oh yeah, the Jay Dyer was just terrible in that discussion," and I even was told that from the guy, I couldn't tell who was actually the Eastern Orthodox in there, if it was either Jay or if it was even, he thought that I could have passed and qualified as Eastern Orthodox because he said I knew how to use the church fathers and cite them properly.
Yeah.
So that was what was interesting and flattering. But yeah, ultimately for that,
they were insulting my intelligence in regards to what the Trinity and hypostatic union were.
Yeah,
everyone knows what they were.
Yeah, they pretty much like to do that. They pretty much just want to be. Can you cite it word for word how this church council in this period said it? Because that's the real formulation. That's what you need to say. That's ultimately how they are, and you'll see that snobbery with Jay if you watch the discussion I had with him. Because at one point, when I'm trying to just go with the church fathers, he said, "Okay, do you even know what the canons of Trent, or not the canons of Trent, the canons of Nicaea are?" Like, I'm not too familiar with the canons of Nicaea. I don't have them memorized word for word. And he just starts citing a bunch of them off. And like, you didn't know those? Like, I don't memorize. It's like, then you know nothing. You're an idiot. And he just used that entire thing. Like, if you didn't know the canons of Nicaea, you can't even know a single thing in your life.
Projection much?
Yeah, this is why he just kept calling me a retard, and then shut the hangout of himself down and emailed me saying, don't ever get back at me again. And then he blocked me on Twitter.
Well, there's a narcissist for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was definitely.
It was you.
Yeah, it was basically.
It was you. I would have cursed like a sailor there.
Yeah, I showed patience. That was the other thing, and I think that's what impressed a lot of the people, is that I just had my patience there, in the same way I did with Aaron Ra. In fact, that was the thing. I compare this guy to being an Eastern Orthodox version of Aaron Ra. That was how bad it was. So yeah. Anyways, thank you for your question there, Zach. All right, so up next, we're getting to Fanboy.
I know you talked about, this is kind of a silly question. I know you talked about a specific sour candy that you were gonna try and like eating one every time you answered a question for like your 100th ask Reformed Christian Apologist, and
I hate the fact that you memorized that.
and I was wondering what your favorite sour candy is, or if you like sour candy.
It would have to be toxic waste because, as far as I'm aware, that is the most sour candy in the world.
Oh my god, jeez, no, that is some powerful stuff.
I would like to try toxic waste, but I've never tried it. I do like warheads though.
Yeah, I might actually try their lesser counterparts. We get this from work. Whenever we have a, I don't know why we keep just getting this as like free stuff, but it's the same company, it's the same candy, but it's in a different form. It's called Sour Smog Balls by Toxic Waste. So you want to have a feeling of what I'm gonna get. I'm gonna just set this in my mouth for a bit, settle it, and when it's ready, I'm gonna take a bite, and that's when the sour begins. And here's how it's so sour. I don't think it really does it, but it almost feels like your molars are getting rearranged. That's how sour it gets in there. So
can I get it?
Usually just have a candy store. Like you can just go to their website of Toxic Waste, and they'll tell you like find store locations that sell them. So he's already playing some. But yeah, that's my favorite sour candy. Is that your question for just asking what my favorite sour candy was?
Yeah, I couldn't come up with any deep questions. I've kind of been, I found out reading the book of Judges is kind of addictive.
Isn't it? Is it any part of the Bible reading it addictive?
Yeah, but I'm enjoying reading it and thinking about what's discussed in it. So I definitely know I'm gonna be doing a Bible study on Judges after Ecclesiastes.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna. Okay, boys. It's time now. Here we go. Oh, that is soft.
And I'm sorry for reminding you about that.
If I
Send help.
Yeah, send help. It's still there. It's still there. It's still there. I sound like Kripke from Big Bang Theory now. If y'all know who that is, kudos. You are a nerd. Congratulations with yourself. And now I'm drooling like crazy too. I'm gonna get some water to help that out.
Get yourself a napkin.
Ugh. And no, that's mild, by the way. That was the sour smog balls. So yeah, imagine what happens with the other thing. And I'm only gonna limit myself with that because I've once had like 5 of them in one day. And woo, they really learn how to mess your tongue up. All right, but yeah. So thank you for your question, by the way. Now on to Ave. What in the world? Who's making ghost sounds?
No, I was just trying to. I was just trying to imitate a hallelujah moment.
Yeah. Hallelujah. All right, there we
go. All right. So I was wondering, well, okay. After the Jews were freed from Egypt, from slavery, you know that they had to wander in the desert for 40 years. You know, God was punishing them because of that whole golden cow incident. But I was kind of curious, why did God also punish Moses? And Moses, you know, he never got to see the promised land. Like, did Moses do something wrong? Or like why was he not able to be there?
There actually is a reason, and that has to do with the rock and water.
Yep, there was I forget what the verse is, but he was told, the Lord will provide, and just have faith and trust in Him. And he was getting impatient. We're getting some background by the way from you, Jay. All right, so we have him walking around and trying to do that. So he's trying to do his best, but at some point he gives into the temptation, and as a result, he says, enough is enough. I'm going to. I'm trying to find the specific verse because I want to actually.
Well, it just didn't really make too much sense to me because I think the entire reason that the whole generation of the Jewish people could not go to the Promised Land was because they started to engage in idol worship. But Moses, I don't think he ever did that. So I don't know why he would also have to go through the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I think the main thing was Moses disobeyed an order from God, and I think that was the main thing. And I'm trying to actually see if I can show it here. It's Numbers 20.
Yeah, he did not give credit to God.
Oh.
Yeah. And so let's go to Numbers chapter 20. It is in, okay, I keep getting lost here. In verse 8 is where we start.
Because I'm pretty sure Aaron was able to go to Israel.
Yeah, Aaron, I probably think, but I think the main thing is that it would eventually kind of be like Joshua would also help out with it. But at verse 8, this is after, of course, the Lord speaks to Moses. Take the rod and gather the assembly together, thou and Aaron thy brother, and speak ye unto the rock before their eyes, and shall give forth his water. So it says, speak ye unto the rock before their eyes, and it shall give forth his water, and thou shalt bring forth to them water out of the rock. So thou shalt give the congregation and their beasts a drink.
Okay.
And so Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him. Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation before the rock, and he said to them, Hear now, ye rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice, and the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beasts also. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, Because you believed me not to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them.
Wait, I don't understand. What exactly did he disobey from God in this passage?
So remember what was mentioned earlier when he says, okay, take the rod.
Yeah.
Verse 8 says, speak ye unto the rock before their eyes, and it shall give forth this water, and thou shalt bring forth to them water out of this rock. And so when it says speak ye, why definitely this is important is because it's, who else do you call upon or provoke when you're speaking in something like that? You give the glory and the credit to God as if God's doing it. And not only that, remember what, according to them, they say, Hear now, ye rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock? Well, did they do that, or was it God? So they seem to give credit to themselves as the ones fetching the water, as the water that, comes out of a rock abundantly, almost too crazy to believe. You seriously think it'd just be the work of these two guys versus the sovereign God? So they failed to obey and give God glory. So they didn't listen to God, and they didn't give him the glory.
But, well, I guess it was Moses that said that. But Aaron was still able to go to the Promised Land, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, but honestly, Aaron really didn't have anything to do with that. It was just Moses that said that.
Right. I know it's Joshua that would certainly live to see of it. He would be the one that helps bring them to it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's So, but like, is that really the only thing though? Like, I know that it's bad to not give glory to God when you're performing a literal miracle, but after everything he's done, I'm not sure if that's justifiable.
Mm.
But I mean,
Why
I'm
not?
not God, so I can't,
Right.
I can't say,
Well,
not my decision.
Yeah, the culture and the way that God worked with them was definitely different than ours. That's why I pretty much agree with Heiser. I'm glad we live in today and under the new covenant compared to how they lived back then.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems pretty harsh.
Yeah, and that was actually what was so funny too. Is like at one point me and my brothers kept getting into trouble and messing up, and our mom or my stepmom pointed out that yep, because we complain about getting whipped and having our behinds spanked, and all of a sudden, it's like y'all have it lucky. Back then in the Bible times, you know what the punishment was for disobeying your father and mother? They stoned them to death, and we're like, yeah, we'd rather take the belt any time of the day over that.
Yeah, right. My goodness.
And I remember walking away from that one time, and my brother looks at me and is like, "Wow, we certainly had it easy compared to them."
Yeah, to be fair, that passage you alluded to was in reference more to an adult son that was a drunkard. Because who else would? I mean, what other age would be excessively drinking?
Well, I guess anyone could pick up a bottle, and it doesn't really matter what age. If they have access to it, I guess.
Yeah. But anyways, oh snap! Before this thing goes out, get in there. All right, there we go. So,
all right. Well, thank you very much. That was informative.
Hey, no problem. Hey! Guess what?
Arf, arf.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the barks and the borks and the bork and the wharf. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. Anyways, White Engine, your turn to ask the question.
Okay, let's see. Why did God go along with stoning as a method of execution in the Old Testament? There's less barbaric ways of killing someone, like snapping their necks.
Yeah. So again, we would have to point out.
Really?
I know, Zach. Just chill. Just try to have some patience and endure with this one. So, okay, when it comes to this idea of why, I think this is what I find, in my opinion, kind of disingenuous. I thought that someone like you has been told this before by me and others, and the people that you claim to research and look into. So do you need me to repeat the answers that we've told you before?
You talked about this before?
Yes, not just me, but other people have talked to you about this before.
What other people?
Like General or Rob of Sentinel Apologetics. I'm pretty sure you've looked into Heiser's material on this subject.
I don't remember him asking Rob that question.
You didn't ask him that question, but the issue is that the subject, the topic, has come up before, and I'm pretty sure you would have heard that. So when it comes to that, when it comes to what we've told you before, when it comes to that, again, they are working through the culture and why God, again, uses these methods. Again, he is focusing on theology for that matter. And so the part, even if it's barbaric, he is working through their culture.
Is that worth a painful death of being bludgeoned to death by big fucking rocks?
Well, it's God's decision to allow that to happen. So you're making the judgment call on God for that. And concerning that, I would assume that anything that goes against the law is, according to the Bible, any sin is punishable. The punishment, the penalty is death. Paul says this. Romans chapter 6, verse 23.
Then he could have easily put the snap in their necks.
Right, he could have done it however he wants, and he chose to do this way. So God can do however he wants, and he chose through this culture to be through this way.
Yes, and not only that, I gave a link to another JP Holdings vids where he talks about the actual punishment act being ransoming vast majority of the time instead of the actual stoning.
Mm-hmm. I would probably think it would just refer to stoning. I would, of course, have a disagreement with it.
Yeah.
The video, of course, is there in case he does want to look into, of course, like I encourage everybody, look into the data. And again, even let's say that this is referring to stoning. I mean, again, are you going to claim that you have some, better idea of how God works? Or you mean that's the question. Are you God, or are you just a man that God created?
I'm just a man who's wondering why God would allow these barbaric methods of execution when it could be done much simpler.
Oh, cut the whole "that's barbaric" crap out already.
Nobody. I mean, people can say the same. Like, let me ask you this, Injin. Do you believe in evolution, that God used evolution to bring about his creation?
Yeah.
Let me quote some people, that either atheists that deny evolution or Kent Hovind would say, why would God use such a cruel, evil, and hurtful and harmful thing like evolution, where you have
looking at it because they look at it in a glass half empty way?
Okay, so wouldn't that be the same thing that you're kind of doing it right here?
No, I'd say it's more along the lines of, this is something back in those ancient times, part of the culture, that was one way of executing God's law. Now, but God can, but this is humans doing this to other humans. Of course, times have changed now, and there's different, more, better ways of doing it. But you have to remember, God has also destroyed cities and civilizations before doing sin, and that was by him, not by other humans. But it wasn't barbaric. That's not really the argument here.
Yeah, because you got to consider that. Let's say this. A lot of people say the flood was barbaric, that, why not snap their necks instead of drowning them in water, which drowning in water is a slow, painful way to go. I mean, would you say that God was being barbaric there?
No, that was simply a method that he used to execute his plan.
Right. So let me ask you this then: why is it barbaric for a slow, painful death through rocks, but it's not barbaric when a flood is being utilized, and this time being utilized directly by God? It's the same thing. It's slow, it's painful, and today we call that terrorism in some areas, with waterboarding, all that kind of stuff, if we let them drown. So again, why would you say that that's a problem? Well, concerning the stoning, when that same reasoning could be applied to the flood.
Yeah, why drown people?
Now you. Because earlier you just said that wasn't barbaric.
What?
Yeah, earlier
I didn't say that was barbaric. I'm just saying that's just.
You said it wasn't barbaric, but now you're saying why not? I mean, you should he just snap the necks? What's so wrong with that? You said it wasn't barbaric. What's the problem?
What do you mean? Then you brought up the flood. I'm like,
I'm asking.
That's also an unpleasant way to die.
Yeah, but it wasn't barbaric, you said. So what's the problem with it?
I didn't say it was barbaric.
No, that's what I'm saying. You said it wasn't barbaric, but it's the same.
No.
Mm-hmm. But it's the same way of rate of death as what happens if you were to stone somebody.
I mean, death is death, but it depends on the method of execution, whether it be done by God or humans. But obviously times have changed now, and the way that humans kill each other, it's a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in most cultures, most civilized cultures, they still use stoning in Islamic nations today.
Yeah, even that's the thing. Islam still believes in that practice concerning what the Quran and the Hadith teaches, and the consistent Muslims utilize that punishment, especially under the Sharia laws. But again, going back to this issue, you're gonna again ask why. I've given the answer, and that is that he works through that culture. And if you had seen my video on Numbers 31, Heiser actually points out something about this whole thing. I don't know. You're gonna have to ignore the music a bit, but listen to what he says here concerning this, because this is Michael Heiser, a guy you respect a lot as a scholar on the Old Testament, especially on these kinds of issues.
It's obviously harsh, but I would take this back, that when you see these familiar practices, when you see these cultural practices, especially if they are associated with idolatry specifically, I think on the one hand, here we are with the Moabites here. On the one hand, you could say there is some logic to the fact that, well, this is what we do in conquest in our patriarchal Semitic culture. This is how we do things, and there are lots of other things again that are familiar to and related to, really part of that world, the world of the biblical person, the world of the biblical writer at the time. And they just sort of, on one level, are what they are. In other words, God doesn't come to Moses or any other biblical author and say, hey, I'd love to use you to write something down, but you need to change your culture first. You need to rid your culture of this particular element that is offensive, or someone living later might consider offensive, or the Gentiles who are going to read this stuff later might consider offensive, or whatever. You need to change your culture first, and then we can work together. Okay, God never does that. And a lot of this stuff that winds up in Scripture, especially in legislation, especially legal kind of things, and again, this is part of it. You have legality, you have conquest, you have warfare, again, the rules of war and all that sort of stuff. That, again, on one level, that just sort of is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, he pretty much nailed it right there.
Yep. So your response to that, Engine?
All right.
All right, what?
All right, I just think an all-powerful, almighty God would be above having to conform to primitive culture.
Why?
Not that again.
Calm down, Zach.
Go ahead, lay it on me.
That is
Okay.
you idiot. Inability to do something does not make an obligation. Get that through to your head.
Do what?
Hey, you told him to lay it on you. I'm not holding him back.
No, I was trying to understand what he was saying.
Yeah.
What was that
The
last bit? I
ability
didn't get it.
Hey. The ability to do something does not make an obligation in of itself, you moron.
Okay, calm down.
All right. I would also say that God does give us free will, and he's not going to inject, his...
I'm not an atheist. Save it for them.
No, but, like, at the end of the day, he's not going to try to change entire cultures unless he has a divine message to send people, which is the case in something like the Ten Commandments or Jesus Christ. But overall, that's just the culture of the time, and God's not going to interject and try to change it. It's supposed to be changing organically over time.
Right.
If I were to draw a modern parallel to that strategy, it would be the libertarian method of gradualism, where you undermine the state by tearing away bits and pieces of all the regulations and tearing down the mindsets for them.
Well, I would say it's more like providing certain doctrines that people could believe in and change their ways and become better people over, in civilization. But it doesn't mean it's going to effectively change the entire culture directly. It's up for the faithful to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, is stoning barbaric in today's standards? Yes, it is. Back then, it was the norm.
Yeah. So even after that, you still think that somehow God could do better?
I guess. I don't know. I'm not God.
There you go. So, I mean, this is why I wish you would read your Bible more and hopefully convert to Christianity, man. This is why we need to at some point have a debate on these issues, because these are important and these are very significant. So,
and
anyways.
if you really want to talk about barbaric practices, I mean, just look at what's happening in Islam. And just like RC mentioned earlier, you know, they still do this stuff. They treat
They're doing what the ancient Israelites did.
Well, they treat women as property.
So did the ancient Hebrews.
Right, but here's the difference, though, is that concerning the issue, they believe that they are supposed to do so and continue to do what the ancients did, because that's how Islam models itself, is to even dress up like how the ancients did, dress up like how Muhammad did, and dress up and shave your beard in the same way that Muhammad kept his beard. And so it's not just, being like that, but even becoming that ancient culture in its entirety. Christianity in the Bible does not demand that of us. It works within the cultures that we have concerning essential truths that are universal.
Precisely, and that's why God acted the way He did back in the day, when in modern times, some certain aspects of those cultures would be considered barbaric or bad, but that's what it was then. Of course, times have changed, but there are certain other religions that don't see it that way.
Right.
Yeah, not to mention we've already covered. I mean, you guys have already covered this whole bit about women in another stream. It's even highlighted, Engine.
Oh, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah, hopefully that you look more into this stuff, man, and hopefully you repent and get right with God, because I know that issue again you mentioned before to me, history, and you know what it is, and I hope that you turn from that sin.
And stop making the same asinine claims over and over and over again while expecting a different result.
Oh my goodness,
I cannot put a leash on Zach here. He's going all out today.
Over and over again.
Yep. All right, so
that's all you ever
what do you mean over and huh?
Oh.
That's all you ever do. You repeat the exact same claims, use the exact same arguments, and use the exact same strategy.
Same
every
arguments and
time.
strategy as who?
Are you listening at all?
Same arguments and strategies of who? Atheists?
No, I'm saying that your approach never changes even after you're corrected.
In other words, what he's saying is that basically, to put it in a nutshell, it's like, what's 2 + 2? And I tell you it's 4, and then you're like, oh, come back the next day. Hey, I gotta know, what's 2 + 2 me? What is it? What is that? I think that's what he's saying, that how you're kind of treating this is essentially.
Exactly.
I don't remember any questions I asked more than once.
Well, you've done it though.
Me?
Except for that one you just told me about, the stoning.
You have been.
There's more.
Yeah,
and not that, because we have like even highlights where we go over some of your stuff, and they do tend to get repetitive.
I'm skeptic. I have questions.
Right, but if you're skeptic though, and you get an answer, do you remain skeptic, or does it get answered and you have knowledge on something?
Yeah, I have knowledge on something.
But yet, when I give you that knowledge, you remain skeptic of it instead.
And then I marinate on it.
You marinate on it. You keep. Here's the thing: to sound like that guy from Princess Bride, you keep using that word, but I'm really starting to question if you think that it doesn't mean what you think it means.
Marinate means you think about it more.
Inconceivable.
Inconceivable.
How are you thinking about it if you're still doing the exact same thing?
I feel like having food now. You said marinade.
There you go. So yeah, I mean,
you can keep claiming that you're thinking about it, but your actions do not show it. You're an automaton.
Yeah. That's why I keep saying that, I keep offering you books and resources for you to read and even ask if you can read or watch these things, but you say you don't have the time or you don't have the patience or really don't. You even at one point, remember it, said you don't even really care to read or
I
look
never
at this
said that.
We have you recorded saying these things.
Oh, no, not recorded, but as far as typed up on a documentation in a message, yeah, that's one thing that you definitely can't forge. I'm pretty sure I can look at it up if I were to go past the history list. But as far as that goes, man, again, I've tried helping you out.
I don't
and
remember.
you've made excuses that change, whether it be that you don't have time or that you don't have the patience for something. I
don't have more patience.
Yeah, and Shane Killian has made a video about that sort of excuse.
Well, all right.
I mean,
let's
calm down. But hold up.
Let's not be too mean here. I mean, it's here talking, willing to engage in conversation, and
Right. Because I agree. I think we need to be a little gentle on the whole thing, but at the same time, I do want to point out that there is a pet peeve. Is that I would imagine it would irritate you if someone keeps asking you the same question that's been given an answer over and over again. It's how I felt during my debate with Aaron Ra. It's how I felt during a couple of my previous debates with people like Marshall, for example, the Muslim who kept asking the same questions over and over again during the Q&A, as well as during our rebuttal period. He kept asking the same thing that keep getting responded and answered, and he still does the same thing today when we privately message about John 17:3, even though I've given him an answer about that. And he keeps going to Mark 10, saying where Jesus says no one is good except God, and he says, see, Jesus says I'm not a good guy. He says only God's good. Jesus says I'm not good. So how can you explain this, Christian? And I'm like, Marshall, I've told you this like 10 times already. So again, I would recommend that.
How did you answer that one?
I did, and I answered by saying that Jesus never denied himself being good. He simply pointed out that he was actually saying that, and I even have a commentary video that I did on this.
It says, why do you call me good? Nobody is good except the Father.
Yeah, he says, why call me good? There's no one good except God.
That question implies that he's not talking about himself.
Actually, it does, because he's saying that you better watch out and realize who you're talking to when you say I'm good, because that means you're talking to God Almighty, and I am He. In fact, that is actually a verse that proves that Jesus is God, as I pointed out in the debate I had with Marshall.
Also, he's probably somebody who doesn't believe that Jesus is actually the embodiment of God. So, of course, he's going to say something like that. Yeah.
Correct. So, he thinks Christianity was invented by Paul and not Jesus. So, yeah. Anyways, so thank you for your question there, White Engine. We're going to end the night with the question from James, who, sorry you got in late. So for that, we'll get you 2 questions to ask for this.
Okay. First of all, hi, fanboy. And as well, how do you do a proper exegesis when you're studying the Bible? And how do you avoid doing exegesis?
All right. Is those 2 questions in one, or is that like just part of?
It's both part of the same thing. So how do you do exegesis while avoiding exegesis? Or exegesis.
Right. I get what you mean. So how you want to do exegesis is to examine the text and use proper hermeneutics. There's a book I have where I was trying to learn some of this, and it was a good introduction. I would recommend anyone who was looking into it. Called Introduction to Biblical Hermeneutics by Walter Kaiser and Moises Sliva or Silva. I forget which of it pronounced because I know he's got a weird name. But basically, the best one approach is the historical grammatical method of hermeneutics, and that is that we examine the biblical text in light of its grammatical and literary context, as well as the historical context. So in order to commit exegesis, we must look at the entire text as a paragraph or its surrounding texts around it, who it's being addressed to, what's the historical context behind that, and that culture, as well as to understand the original languages. I think those can play a big role, and that helps us with exegesis, whereas eisegesis is interpreting our own feelings into the text and having an agenda drive to it. That's why you have Joey Micah, for example, who tries to read El Shaddai and says it means big-breasted one, even though that's really not what it means. And it's a misunderstanding of a certain Hebrew root of the word. And therefore, God is a goddess who has big titties. Sorry for the word usage there, but that's ultimately what she's saying and teaching, is that God's got big breasts because God's a goddess because of that one title. Again, that'd be a classic example of eisegesis, is to utilize those texts for that. And then, of course, Black Hebrew Israelites, the whole nationalism and trying to view themselves as superior and think that their whole thing is connected there, and the struggles, and they try to make those connections into texts, very desperately. So that's the main thing, is that it's agenda driven. They start with presuppositions and try to get those presuppositions into the text, as well as to try to insert their own culture into it and try to read it as it wasn't an ancient person, but as if the Bible was written in the 18th or 19th century, depending on the people you want to go at, concerning their approach at this, especially if we're dealing with cults and how they commit eisegesis of the text.
Sounds like something I've already been. Sounds like something that I've been doing. Not the eisegesis, but the exegesis.
But to say, if you were committing eisegesis, me and Abe would have to come over and give you an interrogation. Good. It'd be a good cop, bad dog.
Orange doggo bad.
Yes.
Well, you'd be facing a dragon.
Yeah. So you said that was one. You said but do you have another?
I'm trying to.
You don't have to use it if you don't want to.
Yeah, I don't really have another question, but that's something that was what are some good resources on researching the problem of evil? That's actually something that's been on my mind as well, because I used to listen to a lot of Ravi Zacharias when I was like 19, when I got out of high school. A lot.
Yeah. That's actually a good question, because in my opinion, there's really not a lot of books on that. So I am curious about that subject. So let me see if there's actually something I can on the problem of evil, because the only one that I really did, like when I did my video on it, I utilized the Systematic Theology book of John Frame and his section on that. So, and I keep going every time I try to go to the Christian bookstores to see if there's any books that deal with the topic, and really there wasn't any. Let's see, there is one from John Knox Press. The author is a professor of philosophical theology at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. So I can tell this guy might be Reformed. His name is William Greenway. And the book is called The Challenge of Evil, Grace and the Problem of Suffering. You can actually get it it was published in 2016, so it's also a recent kind of book. and it's $14.89 on christianbook.com. So
That's the year the Inquisition began.
2016.
No, 1489.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, okay. So, and then there's Christian Understandings of Evil by Charlie P.E. Burns. Let's see. See what else we have. I think that's pretty much it. Is that those are the only two books? And that's the thing. I'm kind of glad that there's something that's actually being done, because that John the William Greenway book is kind of new. That's like 2016. That's really hasn't been too much far from where we are. So I'm actually trying to see if there's actually a way I can get a copy of it.
I'll save this one for later.
Yeah, because I don't see it on my thing. So yeah, that would be something you want to check out, and I'll send it to you on Discord. The link to the where I found it, so that way it might be able to help you out, because it's certainly a good book.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. I've been reading one book for my pleasure. Next book I'm planning on reading is Either or by Soren Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard being I think he was a Dutch philosopher. Basically, his whole thing was being a Christian in Christendom. Basically, the culture is Christian, but the people around him are not. So he was trying to figure out what is it like to be a Christian in a culture that says they're Christian.
Right.
I think it was Scandinavian.
That kind of sounds like it gets back to the topic we were talking about of a religious state, where like you're not really Christian, but you're kind of forced to be.
Yeah, something like that. He sorry, I don't want to take up more of your time.
That's good, because we actually.
What's the guy with the cross's name?
Zach.
Religious fanboy.
No, Zach.
He's talking about the Zach.
Yeah.
The Zach.
I think the guys at Red Pill Religion will love you.
Me?
No.
Zach. Oh no.
Not
me.
I would. It depends, because I'm not sure how Zach would feel about some of the theology over there.
Oh
no, you lay it on. You don't hold back.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure the same thing was kind of said of me whenever I was in there going on Roman Catholicism.
Yeah, the thing about just hearing the phrase red pill leaves me the impression that they're more focused on anti-SJW stuff, which nothing wrong with that in of itself, but when it becomes your main thing, I'm sorry. I mean,
it's anti-anti-theist.
It's more of a metaphor, to be honest. When you say you're being red-pilled, it's a reference to the Matrix, when you kind of wake up from, the dream state and you realize reality.
Yeah, I know where it comes from. Yeah, I watched the movie.
But you are right. They do. I even heard from Max himself that's the main thing is not trying to be a apologetics or an evangelistic thing. It's just dealing with anti-theism or social justice issues for the most part, and that they prefer to use the same rhetoric of people like Aaron Ra, basically like fight fire with fire. In other words, be a jerk in the same way that they are, and I think that's not something we should encourage as Christians.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
No.
That's the go-to strategy of the skeptic community. I mean, I'm sorry.
It gives back. They give back what they give.
Hold on. Being an ANCAP and a libertarian, those guys would not get along with me at all. They want government action, a quote-unquote internet bill of rights, which would which will backfire, just like giving government control of the internet in Britain did for Count Dankula. I'm sorry, I cannot get behind it.
They don't, but like you, they don't pull punches.
Right, but just because of that doesn't mean that that's sometimes encouraged either. Like there's times he's done, and he even says that sometimes he wishes, he needs to hold himself back. That's the thing, because like I remember there was the time that I showed the Black Hebrew Israelites thing, and he just like I was surprised because he was surprised at how crazy this stuff was, this blasphemy coming out of their theology,
and their violence.
Yeah, and the violence.
I was just gonna bring that up too about the Black Hebrew Israelites. How absolutely bonkers that ideology even is.
Yeah, and in fact, there's actually been a video that was done by Capturing Christianity. He interviews a Christian apologist on there, who goes by the name, I think it's I forget what his name is, because he was only thing I disagree with him on is mostly like the egalitarian stuff. But Douglas Gruthius is his name. He's a Christian apologist, and he basically says Christians, like whenever they see this idea of, these atheists, trying to be, mean and like definitely like very anti-theistic and like very harsh, he says to stay calm and respond with gentleness and respect. That's the biblical way. That's the Christian way to do it. And if they still persist, then say, "I'm all right. Well, I guess we're not going to be able to talk," and just like walk away from it. Don't say anything else. Just walk away, and because it's obvious he's just going to keep persisting in that. And not only that, that's again what the Bible says. It says to answer with gentleness and respect. And even the Bible scholars of that verse, like Thomas Schreiner, for example, says, when believers encounter a hostile world and are challenged concerning their faith, the temptation to respond harshly increases. Listen carefully, Engine. This is a Christian scholar here. Defending a position could easily be transmuted into attacking one's opponent. Hence, Peter added that the defense must be made with gentleness and reverence. Goes on to say, those who fear God and live in humility will treat their opponents with dignity and refrain from lashing out against them. What Peter emphasized, however, is the relation with God that enables believers to respond appropriately to unbelievers. So, according to Peter, which according to Max would be the Pope, according to Peter, he says, how are you to respond? Pay with gentleness and reverence. If you disagree with that, you disagree with the Word of God, you disagree with teaching from the Bible, and therefore disagreeing with Christian teaching.
Yeah, and I'll close this discussion on that by saying, while it is true that I do not pull punches, at the same time, I do have my limits where I figure I'm crass. I do not hold back. That much is true. But I'm not an idiot. I do not keep doing it. I do not keep doing all that indefinitely when corrected on it. Plus, with Red Pill religion and the entire skeptic community in general, they have called libertarians a bunch of corporate bootlickers, even though we're the ones that are providing alternatives to government action that could potentially work if we got down to it. We're the ones that are actually putting up the fight and walking the talk. And they do not like that at all. They would rather beg the government on their knees. And for that, they despise guys like me. They're not going to let me into their deal, even if I did want to partake in collaborations with them.
Mm-hmm. So And the only reason, of course, that I'm even in there in the Discord group is because when I plan to talk with Max or have discussions with people that are involved in there, hopefully to change the mindset that goes on with these people, as well as to converse with them about these ideas, as well as to share the content that I have. As you can tell, that I even got a comment from Max earlier today about the video I posted this morning. And I'm not gonna lie, it's almost sounded like he didn't really even like look at or listen to the arguments that I presented, because he said that there's no reason to not use and respect these books. I agree that we have some reason to use them, and he seems to think that I'm kind of going with this straw man that he's affirming for it. So I mean, it's just.
And to be fair, you also called our Orthodox friends heretics right off the bat.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting is he changes his story on that, because at one point he said, "Oh, they are our brethren," and said that if RC Apologist wants to learn true Christianity, besides Catholicism, there's the Orthodox. They're also Christian. They're also in the right standing of the church. You didn't have the Anglican Church, and then he calls the Orthodox this, but now he's saying they're heretics. Make up your mind. So, yeah, this is where I definitely have had where I will have my issues concerning that with Max, and that's why I think people need to again focus on a biblical more concept of Christianity, which is why again I made the film Pure Christianity, so that people understand that there's a different approach even in apologetics compared to the selling out or the issue of even like trying to be as mean-spirited as some people, because I mentioned the whole 1 Peter 3:15 and 16 passages, and people just think, well, that's a sissy move. I don't want to look like a loser. Well, again, that just shows that they care more about how the culture is and what the culture says about them than they do about their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So, yeah,
pretty much.
All right. Yeah. That being said, we're gonna end it here. Man, we definitely make sure to extend it. It's 12:08. Then again, earlier than later than that. We had a guy that was supposed to come on here, who said thank you for putting me on here, but he's not been he hasn't come in here yet, so I don't know. I mean, I was worried that if there was something like this was going to happen or not. So okay, there he is.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, hold up. I don't know if he's got a phone or if there was.
I saw an icon like briefly, and now it looks like a blurry camera.
Let's see. All right, Code Gang.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, this is my generic Google account.
Okay.
That's why it says Code Gang.
All right. Well, I guess before we sign off, then, would you like to ask the last question of the night?
Do you think if like atheists, their most popular like debaters, not really debaters, but like their most popular speakers are well, on YouTube before it was Amazing Atheist back in the like 2008 2010.
Yeah.
Banana Boy.
No, wait, no, let me
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just showing, and then later it's always been Richard Dawkins.
Right.
And then now it's the new clown of the week, Aaron Raw.
Right, I debated him.
No, I know, but it's funny. You see these three people all have like kind of the same thing in common, that doesn't it kind of reflect badly on the atheist community? Or this mostly has to do with atheists, but do you think it reflects badly on the atheists that these are the three people they uphold as the best speakers for atheism?
Oh yes.
Not necessarily. Well, to me, not necessarily, because again, like as I would view anything, even in our circles today, like I don't think there's really anybody that can be considered truly representative, unless, of course, they cite the Bible, concerning Christianity. When it comes to atheism, there's really not much that you have that's dogmatic or it defines it. So when they send somebody, or when they have somebody, they speak for themselves. And when it comes to that, it's unfortunate that that's how it would be. You have some people that when they see people like Aaron Ra, Richard Dawkins, an amazing atheist that have come out as public speakers or content makers that deal with this kind of stuff, they do have some, something that would be very problematic in terms of them. So, like, for example, I remember during the debate with Aaron Ra, he just kept, having losing everything and having an attitude and interrupting me. And that was, very problematic. And there were some people, unfortunately, though, I noticed they encouraged that and said that's the thing to do it. That's how you should do it. But then at the same time, you have others that were saying, I like Aaron Ra and everything, but man, this was bad. This was like just something that just Aaron Ra did not do his best on this one. So I think that it really depends on the atheist. Some prefer the militant anti-theist approach, whereas others prefer reason and logic in engaging something with a nice tone of volume and rational discourse. So when it comes to these people, they only mostly care about what they have to say, like only the words, like basically what comes out on paper. Now your tone and how you decide to try to get that data out in a debate or a public speaking thing, then that's where it can go wrong. And I think that kind of happens with Dawkins, who isn't a theologian and hasn't really got much information on Christianity other than emotions. Then you have Aaron Ra, who likewise isn't really that. As he admits in our debate, his main knowledge and sources of this stuff, we're getting interference there from you. All right. So when the main problem then is like Aaron Ra, he admits that the main stuff that he has on this comes from like his experience as a Baptist, and his experience with church and all that, and and him trying to have a difficult moment, and when God didn't answer a prayer he had, then that's when that's literally all he's got with the whole thing on Christianity, and nothing else on that matter. And so you have that, and then Amazing Atheist, of course, you have his experience and his just again emotional rants on that.
No, TG is more comedy.
Right, but again, it's all emotion.
If I may, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
AIU is also comedy. He's amusing.
All right, let him. I'm finished.
All right. You finished?
No,
I don't think you're. Are you finished with the statement?
Yeah.
What I meant, but I think you misunderstood my comment. But what I meant is that these, as a community, like you do not see like many atheists speaking out against really these like prominent figures, and that these, like I said, these figures are the most popular, the ones that are the most liked, the ones that.
So you're saying that there's people that haven't spoken up against these guys?
Well, I'm not saying there isn't, but I'm saying is that it seems that the most popular are the most rude and most uneducated of all of them.
It's been that way forever.
Like, right. Have you seen the debate with Mimi Hijab and David Wood?
Yeah.
And like how he was yelling and shouting over David Wood, but he still lost. And the Muslims
claiming that he lost. Yeah.
You know, Elijah means God is with us.
No,
it's funny. It's funny because Elijah means Yahweh is God, not God is with us. Because,
Right, I know. I watched, I saw the debate, and that's what David Wood and eventually others had pointed out.
I think it was more of actually a humiliation for
Hey,
Wow.
dude, what? I don't know what's going on over there, but your thing is like that nearly busted my eardrums out.
My goodness, what was that?
I have no idea.
I always had mine at a reasonable level, so it didn't shock me too much.
All right, turn my volume down because that just nearly busted me. Anyways, so concerning that, I mean, I think there are people that do speak out against them, especially that are atheists, and the fact that there's some that turn out like that. I mean, I don't know. It's just they are who they are, and it's due to the hardness of their heart. And that's why they need Christ. That's why they need the gospel. So
yeah, and this whole thing about and this whole thing about what you said earlier about pure Christianity. This is why I try to tread lightly when combining Christian apologetics and anarchist rhetoric, because I don't want to overstep my bounds on either end.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, you definitely made sure to keep it a little later, so I'm gonna definitely just make sure to just try to test things out with the mic. I do like a mic test, like recording stuff, and try to figure out how to work with that because man, that just hurt my ears. But anyways, I'm gonna try to get some rest, work on my sermon for Jude because I will be preaching again on the 24th. So definitely expect a video for that for a sermon on that. So, but until then, thank y'all for tuning in, and thank y'all for watching and bearing with us for this long period of, well, I don't know, maybe we did go on to the point of about 3 hours almost. But until then, this has been RC Apologist. Take care.